think it will always remain the key that the diversity of Ethiopia needs to be channeled in a productive direction. So how do you have places where people encounter one another's traditions, other ethnic groups, so that you prevent these walls of fear going up that work by identification either via ethnicity or religion?
So, back to our question. Are Ethiopians losing faith in their Orthodox Church? I've been going to Ethiopia since 1993. The Orthodox Church appears to be a lightning rod for issues that reach deep into Ethiopia's past. But anyone who's been there can't help but admire the people who crafted those heart-stoppingly beautiful churches from solid rock in Lalibela. Some of these structures predate the cathedrals of Europe. The people who built them say they've been keeping the Ark of the Covenant safe for more than 1,000 years. Think of it, millions of people over hundreds of years affirming their faith in the Ethiopian Orthodox Church. Fewer people will be doing that now as more people embrace Islam or other denominations. But church bells and Muslim calls to prayer are common sounds in the towns and villages across the country. So are the sounds of Pentecostal prayer and worship services. People try and make room for each other as they go about their prayers. It is clear that Ethiopians believe that faith in all its manifestations helps them to better understand themselves and navigate their lives. But they clearly no longer believe that the Ethiopian Orthodox Tewahedo Church is the only way they can do that. This edition of The Inquiry was presented by me, Audrey Brown, produced by Philip Revell, and researched by Matt Tolson. The editor is Tara McDermott, and the technical producer, Nikki Edwards.
That was the BBC's The Inquiry here on CBC Radio 1.
Good morning, Manitoba. I'm Marcy Marcusa, and this is Information Radio. We are live in downtown Winnipeg on 89.3 FM, 990 AM on the app or on YouTube. Good morning, everyone. We are on air with you till 8:37 AM with the morning show, and thank you so much for making us part of your day. Let's say good morning to the team. Good morning, Corey Funk. Corey covers the commute and directs the show. Good morning, Brad Lillies, who's behind YouTube this morning. Good morning, Abby Adeyemi, who is our technical producer and behind the controls of the show, also covering weather. I need to mention something in traffic that has actually just developed here. Highway number 1 westbound is closed. This is at Deacon's Corner. So Highway 1 westbound, just in that section near Deacon's Corner, is now closed. So that is due to a motor vehicle collision. That is as much information as we have to this hour. So we'll update you when it opens, and hopefully nothing too serious has gone on there. But right now, affecting traffic. 2 minutes to 6 now. Let's say good morning to Heather Wells and get caught up on the news. Good morning.
Good morning. The deaths of an entire family in Carman have renewed discussions around domestic violence. A 29-year-old man faces 5 murder charges in the deaths of his 30-year-old partner, their 3 young children, and a 17-year-old relative. RCMP would not label the homicides as domestic violence, and that isn't sitting well with some experts. We'll hear more about why they want that act to be named. That's coming up. As well, you could hear this sound last night in Chinatown. Lunar New Year celebrations at Kumkun Gardens with drumming and a lion's dance. More than 600 people celebrating the Year of the Dragon. We'll take you there in our next local news at 6:30.
Oh, I haven't been there in so long, Kumkun Gardens. Now
Me
I want
too.
dim sum. Well, we should go for steam buns soon. Huh?
Absolutely.
Love that. Can't wait to hear more about that story. Thanks, Heather.
You're welcome.
Speaking of stories we'll hear more about in the first hour of the show, love is in the air this week. It is Valentine's Day. Our mental health columnist, Mark Hennick, this morning is going to talk about mentally healthy relationships, not just love relationships, all of our relationships. So stay tuned. We'll talk to Mark in the first hour of the show. A little bit later in the program, we're going to talk public art. We'll talk to an artist who says that the city's decision to cut some public art funding is a mistake.
with Tom Power.
A new biopic is coming out about Bob Marley. It's called Bob Marley, One Love, and it focuses on Bob's life in the late 1970s. Ronaldo Marcus Green is the director of the film. He'll be here to tell you about why he wanted to tell Bob's story.
One love, one art, one destiny.
That's coming up on Q, followed by Commotion with Elamine Abdel Mahmoud on CBC Radio 1, the CBC Listen app, and everywhere you get your podcasts.
This is World Report. Good morning. I'm Marcia Young. Donald Trump's recent comments have already been raised at a NATO defense ministers meeting in Brussels. The Republican frontrunner said if NATO members do not spend enough on defense, they should not be guaranteed protection from the alliance. And he took it even further, saying he would even encourage Russia to attack. Briar Stewart has more reaction.
As defense ministers begin to meet in Brussels, the Secretary General of NATO, Jens Stoltenberg, pointed out that spending among member countries has risen dramatically since Russia's invasion.
This year, I expect 18 allies to spend 2% of their GDP on defense.
31 countries are currently part of NATO, and Sweden is expected to be formally admitted to the alliance soon. While U.S. President Joe Biden called Trump's comments dumb and dangerous, Stoltenberg took a more measured tone.
So any suggestion that we are not standing up for each other, that we are not going to protect each other, that does undermine the security of all of us.
Canada is near the bottom of the list when it comes to spending among NATO members. According to the alliance, Canada spent just under 1.4% of its GDP last year on defense, well below the 2% target.
Who knows what else candidate Trump will say?
Ben Barry is a senior fellow of land warfare at the International Institute for Strategic Studies and says NATO countries need to be spending more to ramp up military production.
To fill in the holes in the road, the many weaknesses of readiness, such as stockpiles and ammunition and spare parts that the Ukraine war has shown up.
Part of the meetings underway in Brussels will focus on additional help for Ukraine. While on the battlefield, Ukraine has been mostly on the defensive. It has been able to launch successful attacks at Russian targets by using drones. And today, Ukrainian officials say their military destroyed a large Russian landing ship in the Black Sea. Briar Stewart, CBC News, London.
Thousands of gig workers across the globe say they are going on strike today. They won't be turning on their apps to accept rides on platforms like Uber and Lyft or deliveries with companies like DoorDash and Skip the Dishes. The workers are demanding fairer pay and better working conditions. Bryce Soffer has been a gig worker since 2015. He says last week he made less than $6 working for 2 hours.
I live in Toronto, which we know is one of the most expensive cities in Canada and actually one of the most expensive cities in the world. And those types of earnings are just completely do not meet the needs of people who live in this city.
Some experts say if the protests are big enough, companies will be forced to renegotiate with workers. Ontario and British Columbia have both introduced legislation to protect gig workers. The new rules are not yet in force. Farmers in India clash with police for a second day. They're attempting to march to New Delhi. They began their demonstration hundreds of kilometers away Tuesday morning. They've been stopped at the border. Protesters yell at a line of police and security standing behind cement blockades. Hundreds of tractors and trucks line the local highway. They cannot move forward and are still some 200 kilometers away from Delhi. The farmers want the government to honor its promise to pay more for their crops. Police have blocked all of the major routes leading to the capital from Punjab. They have also banned large gatherings in New Delhi. An early unofficial tally of the votes in Indonesia show Defense Minister Prabowo Subianto in the lead. Millions of people cast their ballots in the presidential election campaign that's been marred by controversy. Current President Joko Widodo was criticized for placing his son on the ballot as Subianto's running mate, despite him not meeting the age requirement. many observers fear Widodo is building a political dynasty and damaging the country's democracy. Also, former General Subianto served as a special forces commander under a brutal dictatorship 25 years ago. His unit has been linked to torture and kidnappings, all of which Subianto has denied. Decades after, we're going to take you now to Washington, where Richard Madden is going to give us the latest on what's happening in the Senate there. House Republicans accuse Alejandro Mayorkas of high crimes for his handling of the U.S.-Mexico border. Richard Madden has the latest. And Richard, what does this mean for Alejandro Mayorkas?
Okay, so all eyes will be on the Senate because Mayorkas will soon face a trial there, but Democrats hold a slim majority, so a conviction is highly unlikely. Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer could either punt it off to a committee or move a motion to just acquit Mayorkas altogether. Once again, a conviction is highly unlikely. But House Republicans achieved what they wanted to, pushing that resolution to impeach Mayorkas with just a single vote, putting them over the finish line. But the far-right flank of the Republican Party prevailed, impeaching Mayorkas over what they claim is his failure to secure the southern border and enforce immigration laws. Here's Georgia Republican Marjorie Taylor Greene.
To send the message to the Biden administration that it's our border that matters.
Now, moderate Republicans, Democrats, and most constitutional experts say this is more of a policy dispute that doesn't meet the bar of high crimes and misdemeanors. In a statement last night, President Joe Biden called the impeachment vote a, quote, petty political game, adding history will not look kindly on Republicans for their unconstitutional partisanship.
Richard, a big election in New York yesterday to replace disgraced Republican Representative George Santos. Tell us about the significance of that vote.
Yeah, it's a big deal because the House Republicans' razor-thin majority just got even smaller. Democrats are projected to flip that seat held by disgraced Republican George Santos, who was expelled by Congress in December. Now, both parties poured huge money into the suburban swing district in Long Island that had typically been a safe Democratic seat, but issues like immigration and crime made it competitive. But this decisive win by Tom Suozzi is good news for Democrats, hoping for them it's a glimpse of the national mood heading into November. Once he's sworn in, the Republican House majority goes down to 2, leaving them little room for error to advance their agenda.
All right. Thank you, Richard.
Thank you.
The CBC's Richard Madden in Washington. The president of the Canadian Border Services Agency is saying there were failings in the development of the ArriveCan app. It was developed to streamline border crossings at the height of the pandemic, but record keeping was so bad, Canada's Auditor General could only guess at the total cost. She estimates taxpayers paid nearly $60 million for ArriveCan. CBSA President Erin O'Gorman was questioned by MPs yesterday.
The absence of documentation is what is giving rise to these serious questions. Without a doubt, people were moving fast, but that doesn't justify cutting and pasting contracted resources experience directly from statements of work or collaborating with a company on a document they will eventually build on.
O'Gorman joined the CBSA after the ArriveCan app was developed. She says she's fully engaged in fixing the issues described in the report. Her agency is conducting an internal investigation. The vacation rental app Vrbo says it is working to take down its Super Bowl commercial under pressure from Newfoundland and Labrador's tourism department. The ad does not actually show any scenes of the province, but it does show a nightmare vacation rental set to the tune of a traditional folk song. That's causing offense. And as Heather Gillis reports, the province is now airing an ad of its own.
Newfoundland and Labrador's tourism department is now fighting back against Vrbo with an ad of its own, showcasing what it calls the real Newfoundland and Labrador. An ad using the same song, sending a very different message.
This looks like an actual farm.
It looked cute on the app.
This Vrbo ad aired during the Super Bowl, using Eyes the Buys, a popular traditional Newfoundland folk song. It shows farm animals making a mess all over a vacation rental and disappointed travelers. It's angered Kirk Saunders.
It's upsetting. It brings on feelings of being disrespected.
It's personal for Deborah Borden, a tourism operator in Twillingate, one of the towns named in the song.
Whoever did this
obviously doesn't know anything about Newfoundland and Labrador, and most certainly doesn't know anything about rural Newfoundland and Labrador. So it's disappointing.
The province's tourism minister, Steve Crocker, called for the ad to be removed, saying it's not an accurate representation of our province, our culture, or our people. Verbo says the ad is a dig at its competitor, not the province, but that's not changing things for Saunders.
I've never used Verbo before. I certainly will never.
Meanwhile, Verbo confirmed to a Newfoundland and Labrador Senator, David Wells, that it is taking steps to remove the ad, but didn't say when. Heather Gillis, CBC News, St. John's.
And that is the latest national and international news from World Report. I'm Marcia Young.
Good morning, everyone. Welcome to Wednesday, February 14th. Happy Valentine's Day. I'm Marcy Marcusa with our team here at Information Radio. This is CBC. You're on 89.3 FM, 990 AM on the app or on YouTube. So many ways to find us. And that's good because we've got a solid hour ahead for you. In Winnipeg, let's start with just plugging into what is going on in the weather. Still cloudy out there. -4. We are the warmest spot in the province right now. Well, coming up in this hour, speaking of Valentine's Day, our mental health columnist Mark Hennick is going to talk about mentally healthy relationships, not just with the love of your life, but all of our relationships. What's love got to do with it? Stay tuned for that. Also in this hour of the program, how are Canadians viewing the Israel-Hamas war and the situation in Gaza? There's new research out that suggests opinions are shifting. We'll talk about how and why. So that's coming up just before 7. Right now, Heather Wells joins us with a news update. Good morning, Heather.
Good morning. A Legal Aid Manitoba commissioned survey wants to know your opinion of an alleged serial killer. Conducted by Main Street Research, the online poll examines public attitudes towards Jeremy Skibicki. He is charged in the deaths of 4 Indigenous women. We're going to hear from a Vancouver-based criminal defense lawyer about what this survey may be up to, so we'll hear about that coming up. And last summer's strike at the Manitoba Liquor and Lotteries cost the corporation around $10 million. The number is an estimate based on projected sales if the month-long labor dispute didn't happen. We'll hear from the corporation CEO, Jerry Sewell, who says it's more than just the financial cost that his corporation has endured. That's coming up, as well as other news at 6:30.
Heather, we should build on that story we heard on World Report this morning, because if you're one of those people that orders breakfast and you expect it delivered from the likes of DoorDash or maybe Uber or Lyft are going to help you around this morning, you might find that workers don't show up.
Yes, there's a gig worker strike right through cities in Europe and in Canada. 3 cities are impacted, Toronto, Winnipeg, Vancouver, affecting, and it's not just ordering breakfast. If you're trying to get to work and you usually take an Uber, you may not be able to do that today.
Absolutely. So I'm wondering, how people want to engage in that story with us here, given that Winnipeg, our city, is one of the cities that is affected to be, potentially going to be impacted by this. So let's open the phone line, 788-3205. If you were, thinking about that, would that impact your day? Or also, if you're a worker in one of those, one of those companies, you work in the gig economy, what are your concerns? And will you be out today, off the job because you want to highlight those concerns? 788-3205 is our listener line, 788-3205. I'll get something up on Facebook later as well, in case you want to weigh in there. All right, well, let's plug everyone into our Wednesday here, starting with our weather forecast with Abby Adiyemi. Good morning.
Good morning, Mercy. Right now it's -4 degrees with mainly cloudy skies. Another mild start to your morning, and expect these cloudy conditions to stay with us all day. We may see some flurries in Winnipeg and a brisk wind from the west, and then the high will stick around -4 degrees. The cloud will persist later tonight, and then a chance of flurries and temperatures will be dropping to bone chilling -22 tonight. If we look ahead to Thursday, we're going to definitely see some sun and cloud coming here and there, and a high of -12. But right now, it's a mild Valentine's Day start in Winnipeg. It's -4 in the city.
All right, thanks, Abby.
You're welcome.
And Corey Funk is in early this morning as well. We have a big traffic closure to talk about.
Yeah, this is is going to affect folks who are driving into Winnipeg from eastern Manitoba on Highway 1 this morning. Highway 1 westbound from path 207 to path 206 near Deacon's Corner is now closed. So that's the section from the Centre of Canada Park up to Deacon's Corner right there. That whole S section there is closed westbound due to a motor vehicle collision. So you do want to find another way to get into Winnipeg if you're coming on highway coming from eastern Manitoba heading west. If you see anything else out there, though, if you're walking, biking, driving, do give me a call on that CBC commuter line. Curious to see what you're seeing out there, particularly on the highways as well, because I'm even just looking at Manitoba 511. I see Highway 75 immediately west of south of Winnipeg is being reported right now on Manitoba 511 as covered. So I'm curious what that means for folks who might be on Highway 75 this morning. If there's a little more, if the slippery conditions are normal. Yeah, 204-788-3093.
Well, today is Valentine's Day, and as I alluded to, our mental health columnist Mark Hennick is here with his take on it to talk about more how to build, fix, and maintain the connections that define mentally healthy relationships of all kinds. Mark, as mentioned, joins us. Hi.
Hi there.
So when it comes to our mental health, what's love got to do with it?
Yeah, I mean, it's hard for me not to see how our ability to both love and be loved impacts our mental health in so many ways. I mean, we live for love. We thrive on it. And I would argue, actually, that we can't have complete mental health without it. Now, we have a few decades worth of brain imaging evidence which suggests that love is a basic biological need. And there's two areas of our brain in particular that are activated when we're in love, which help to explain why it feels so good, but also why it motivates so much of what we do. So we've got the caudate nucleus. That's a region in the brain that's associated with the integration of sensory experiences into social behavior. So in other words, how we translate signals from our body into the interactive exchanges with other people. Then meanwhile, the ventral tegmental area, that's part of the brain's reward circuit, and it's involved with feelings of pleasure, attention, and motivation, and that's active in love too. So those sensory experiences that you're having, they get paired with a dopamine release, which associates them with pleasure. Now, we translate all those neurological experiences into the interactions that become relationships because we want more of that reward. It feels good. When the other person that we're talking to or in that space with is doing the same thing, then that conversation between us is how deep connections are made. That reciprocity, that's really at the heart of what I see as the 3 R's of healthy relationships: responsiveness, repair, and recollection.
Now, are you only talking about romantic relationships in this context?
No, I think this applies to any form of love. I mean, romantic relationships for sure, but love is also more universal than that. We love our kids and our parents, our friends and our colleagues. We love our country and our passions and our pets. Love, in fact, is everywhere.
So how do we spark and cultivate healthy relationships?
Well, this is really the first R that I mentioned, responsiveness. In order to spark healthy relationships, it starts with being open. We have to be as unguarded as we can safely allow ourselves to be. Because in order to respond to incoming information, we have to be ready to receive it. In order to listen to CBC radio, you got to be tuned to the right channel on which the signals are being broadcast. So, I like to think of being in love more as being in love. Now, maybe that's a distinction that only works on the radio, but I think that it means that love is a place. It's a place, a state into which we enter as independent beings. And whenever we gather in that place, something special happens. Everything you experience in there with people is in love. We stand in love. We sit in love. We rest in love. And when you're in love with somebody in that place of love together, then you're two imperfect beings sharing a space, just as you are. You're not loving at each other. Your love isn't contingent on the person or based on anything that anyone needs to pretend to be. You don't have to earn it or be worthy of it. You don't even have to feel like you deserve it. You're just in there, tuned to the same channel with open ears and minds and hearts. I think that's how we prepare ourselves for love. It's how we establish a responsive connection with people. It's by allowing ourselves to be in love.
Now, relationships can take work, and not everybody's coming from the same place of having a healthy understanding of love or hasn't been shown love and maybe is on a trajectory to learn themselves. So how does a person respond in a healthy way when things go wrong in a relationship?
Yeah, although it's a basic human need, love is, we do have to learn how to do it in terms of the mechanics of it. And our earliest attachments really teach us the template for that, what to expect from others, for better or for worse. Many of us learn how to love, often imperfectly, from our own parents or our caregivers. It's those early connections, depending on how responsive they were, that teach us how to deal with the ruptures when they inevitably occur, the mismatches that come up. Sometimes we're going to get static on the channel, or the signal might not come through the noise. Sometimes we might just be on a different channel altogether. And when that happens, it's important to notice the disconnect and then to do that second R, to repair it. Now, the author David Richo, he suggests an oops, ouch approach to repair. He wrote a great book called How to Be an Adult in Love. So what that means is that when I fail to live from a place of love myself, I can say oops, which means to admit it, to make amends for it, to resolve to act differently next time. And then when others fail to act in love toward me, it's okay that I say ouch, which means to openly express my hurt and to ask for amends. But also to be careful not to get caught up in getting even or holding grudges or getting stuck on hate. Because these types of mismatches, they're actually the moments that forge resilient relationships if we choose to move through them rather than cling to them. And really, relationships are made in this repair.
Your third R that you're talking about is recollection. How does memory come into play in relationships?
Well, I think it's the thread that ties it all together, especially in relationships of some years where you get to a point and the history of the relationship itself becomes a sustaining element of the love. Love cultivates love. And nostalgia is surprisingly beneficial to our mental health when you can look back on that time together. I was thinking about this because this is actually my 20th Valentine's Day with my now wife. And over all those years, you get to look back over the life that you shared, and you get to cherish the best of it, but forget the rest of it. Time has this lovely way. Time just blunts the edges of our memories, I think. And that's a good thing. That's what it's supposed to do, because it's always complicated and messy. But it's not just romantic relationships, as we said. You get to recall love in how you raise your kids. Kids are memories of your love. Love grows by giving it away, and those little people, they're going to take all the love you can possibly give. You get to recall your love when you care for an aging parent. In many ways, the roles get reversed, and you give that which you were given. I didn't get to do that with my mother, but I visited my dad recently, and it had me thinking about this. It reminded me of what a gift it is to recall and transcend the past with your parent and just to rest in love. Because in the end, we're all just walking each other home. And it's a profound act of love to walk that journey with anyone.
Now, before you go, I know that every week with your column in mind, you tell us something you're grateful for. So what's the gratitude this week?
Well, I'm grateful for my new baby girl that my wife and I welcomed just last Friday.
Hey, congratulations.
Thank you. She's our fourth. And the author Ram Dass once said that to open your heart, you start to love that which you can love, and you just keep expanding it. And I was raised Irish Catholic, so we just kept expanding it, I guess. But, we did that because if you want to be in love, you can't just worship at the gate. You have to go into the inner temple. So I'm grateful for this temple that is my family where I can be in love.
Sweet. Thank you, Mark.
Thank you.
That is our mental health columnist for CBC, Mark Hennick, on Valentine's Day. It is 6:24 a.m. on 89.3 FM, 990 a.m. or on the app. It's -4 in Winnipeg and winds are northwest at 36, west at 36 km. Brandon's partly cloudy right now and it's -8. It's snowing just lightly up in Thompson, but the temperature there is -20 for you this morning. Well, next on the show, have you been following Being Black in Canada? There's so many great features there on that CBC website. One of them features a Canadian co-production. They're asking the question, what would it be like to travel back in history to a segregated America and understand the pain and the terror of those days? This award-winning virtual reality film that looks at this is called Traveling While Black. CBC's Manjula Selvarajah says it also shows the promise of virtual reality.
Is virtual reality dying, or is VR on the rise? It's an ongoing debate across the internet. But some big tech companies are doubling down on the potential of VR. Take Apple. Its first ever virtual and augmented reality headset, the Apple Vision Pro, went on sale in January.
And a magical way to be immersed in entertainment. The era of spatial computing is here.
But the era mentioned in that ad for the Vision Pro has been over a decade in the making. The big stir around headsets started in 2012 when a 20-year-old entrepreneur launched a Kickstarter fundraising campaign to build one, the Oculus Rift. He then sold the company to Facebook 2 years later for $2 billion. Facebook's parent company, Meta, is now the market leader in VR/AR headsets. Research firm Statista estimates that it has 75% of the market share. Paul Raphael says VR allows creators like him to go beyond the confines of the frame.
For us, virtual reality is a medium of presence.
Raphael is a co-founder and chief innovation officer at the Emmy-winning Montreal-based Felix and Paul Studios.
And that really changes the mind state the viewer is in when they're experiencing the piece. So instead of watching something about other people, you are invited to step into that world.
Meta and Apple brag about the hundreds of VR and AR apps in their stores. You can get fit, play games, and travel the world. But creators are using VR to make their audiences feel something more. Emotions from fear and rage to elation. Paul Raphael and his team co-produced such an experience in 2019 with American director Roger Ross Williams. It's called Traveling While Black, and it takes users back to a time in America when Jim Crow laws were in place, enforcing racial segregation.
Every trip through America for a black person during those times was potentially fatal. The assumption is at some time it stopped, and that's not the case. It never stopped.
The piece is inspired by a stage play about the Green Book. This was a real-life guide Black Americans used in those days to find safe travel stops throughout the country. Williams' VR film weaves together archival footage, immersive experiences, and interviews to convey a sense of what Black people faced then and face now. Paul Raphael says it's akin to a reality simulator.
Yes, it has aspects of film, it has aspects of theater, it has aspects of real life. It has aspects of an immersive experience like you might have going to an exhibit, but it's also none of those things, right? And so it really is the birth of a new medium.
Felix and Paul Studios have several such experiences in their portfolio, from exploring the International Space Station to touring the White House with the Obamas. Meta has included Traveling While Black in a curated series called VR for Good. Meanwhile, Isaac Valancourt is excited about the potential of VR. He's a Sudbury, Ontario-based artist, filmmaker, and community organizer.
Virtual reality technology has been around for quite some time now. We've gone through ebbs and flows of popularity, but I feel like we're reaching a new golden age of VR experiences.
He already has a 2D experience under his belt. Valancourt is part of a volunteer team at Black Lives Matter Sudbury who created a virtual museum of Black history. You can find it at the website vmblackhistory.ca. Like a visit to a real-life museum, a visitor to the website starts off with what looks like a museum ticket and a map. They can then walk around the virtual wings of the museum.
Visitors can learn about a wide array of topics ranging from Viola Desmond, Black Canadian artists, Africville, etc.
It's free and was recently translated into French.
And oftentimes, these historical texts can be so dense. I'm all for breaking down information in accessible ways, and oftentimes that's through creative storytelling. The idea of virtual reality is extremely exciting to me. I do understand there are a lot of cost barriers, so I would be interested in exploring ways to bring that technology to communities that might not necessarily have access to it.
The new Apple headset is priced at over $4,000. Meta's latest one, the Meta Quest 3, retails at over $600. That pricing matters to the average user, but content matters too, especially if that content can take you to a new place, virtually and emotionally. So we'll have to wait and see if more content creators jump onto this newish medium. For CBC Radio, I'm Manjula Selvarajah.
Coming up to our news time at 6:30. And first, though, Corey Funk is in because we have developing traffic.
Highway 1 westbound between Deacon's Corner and the Centre of Canada Park is closed right now due to a vehicle collision. Maria phoned and said you can get around it by taking Highway 207 through Lorette, but it is closed between 207 and 206. So Highway 207 is your best way to get west around that. As well, RuPaul called McPhillips eastbound. When you right turn onto William, there's a lump there. That's all she could describe it as, between two lanes. So look out for that. You don't want to ruin any tires or anything like that. Give me a call if you see anything else. 204-788-3093.
Still ahead, Phil DeMont with our business report. U.S. inflation numbers came in higher than expected yesterday. We'll find out more about that as all stock markets dropped upon the news. Right now, speaking of news, your CBC Winnipeg News.
This is CBC News. Good morning. I'm Heather Wells in Winnipeg at 6:30. Winnipeg's feeling mild for Valentine's Day. We are at -4 in Winnipeg right now, and that's the high for the day. Mostly cloudy. We may see some flurries as well today. A Legal Aid Manitoba commissioned survey wants to know your opinion of an alleged serial killer. Conducted by Main Street Research, the online poll examines public attitudes towards Jeremy Skibicki. He is charged in the deaths of 4 Indigenous women. Anthony Robinson is a Vancouver-based criminal defense lawyer. He says Skibicki's defense may face hurdles if the intent behind this survey is to use the results to renew calls for a judge-alone trial.
Just because people have answered the survey one way doesn't necessarily mean that they wouldn't change their views once given instructions by a judge about how to apply the law to a particular set of facts.
Robinson says the survey could suggest the defense's path forward in Skibicki's trial. The deaths of 5 family members in Carman are highlighting the need for more help for people facing domestic violence. Researchers and experts say Manitoba and all of Canada are in an epidemic of intimate partner violence. According to Statistics Canada, a woman is killed by her partner or former partner every 6 days. And Manitoba has the second highest rate of intimate partner violence among provinces. Kendra Nixon is a social work professor at the University of Manitoba and director of the Resolve Network.
We've experienced 7 years of escalating rates of intimate partner violence in this country. It is an epidemic, and we need to do something about it. And I mean something that is meaningful.
A 29-year-old man faces 5 murder charges in the deaths of his 30-year-old partner, their 3 young children, and a 17-year-old relative. Earlier this week, RCMP were asked if the deaths were being investigated as domestic violence, but police would only say they are homicides. Last summer's strike at Manitoba Liquor and Lotteries cost the corporation around $10 million. That number is an estimate based on projected sales had the month-long labor dispute not happened. Corporation CEO Jerry Sewell telling a legislative committee hearing yesterday there were also added costs like hiring replacement workers, and that's not all.
We all focus on the bottom line, but I think it's most important to focus on kind of how it impacted our employees. Again, this was a significant impact to their lives, whether it's financial, mental wellness, something we didn't want to put our employees through.
Sewell expects liquor and lotteries to make up for the lost revenue this fiscal year. He says sales for drinks like coolers and ciders are rising. Drivers for rideshare and delivery companies are expected to stay in park today. A one-day strike will hit companies like Uber and DoorDash. The drivers of those companies are fighting for higher wages and better working conditions. The work stoppage may cause people in Winnipeg, Toronto, and Vancouver to rethink how they get to where they need to go today. Details from CBC's Marianne Dimian.
It's Valentine's Day, but rideshare and delivery drivers say, you know what, it's time for a breakup. In Toronto, Winnipeg, Vancouver, they're saying put down your phones, silence and ignore, even just don't use those gig apps, things like Uber, Uber Eats, even Lyft and DoorDash, just for Valentine's Day, because they're trying to send a message to the companies that they want better pay, better treatment, just better conditions overall. And it's all in solidarity with thousands of gig workers, not just here in Canada, but also around North America, as well as in the UK.
Marianne Dimian in Toronto this morning. Celebrating the Year of the Dragon. Some 600 people at a Lunar New Year banquet hosted by the Winnipeg Chinese Cultural and Community Centre last night. Festivities kicked off with a lion dance. Kenneth Tonthat was one of the young men beneath the lion's long, colorful costume.
Good opportunity for us to bond together and also really focus on our tradition and keep it alive. It brings luck and fortune to everybody, and we just want to scare away all anything bad that may come in the new year.
The lion leapt and danced, making its way to every table in the banquet hall. People tapped the lion's forehead, putting red envelopes of cash into its mouth to bring good luck for the new year. The mayor and premier were part of last night's celebration at Winnipeg's Kum Kum Garden restaurant. You can find more news updated throughout the morning. Just head to cbc.ca/Manitoba.
Thank you, Heather Walls.
You're welcome.
By the way, that story about the gig economy and what could be happening, as you just heard here in Winnipeg today, with workers planning demonstrations because they are looking for better pay and conditions. How will that affect you? Whether you're in that economy and you're one of those workers or whether you're someone that uses services from those workers. We'd love to hear from you on the listener line today. We're having some Facebook tech issues, which is no big deal because it's radio. We want you to call us. So 788-3205 is the listener line. Right now, it's time to touch base with Abby Adiemi and find out about our regional forecast in Manitoba.
Once again, good morning. Looking at Winnipeg and surrounding areas, it's currently minus 4 degrees. Expect a mild Valentine's Day with mostly cloudy skies. There's a chance of flurries and the high will reach minus 4 today. Moving west to Brandon. Brandon is currently at minus 9. It's mostly cloudy over there with a chance of flurries today. The high will be minus 5. Thompson is currently at minus 20. Light snow is expected to end this afternoon, and then it's going to be cloudy with a chance of flurries in the afternoon returning, and temperatures will fall into minus 22. Now, with the wind chill, it's going to feel like near minus 32. Churchill is at minus 24. You need to brace yourself for cloudy day, then becoming a mix of sun and cloud. You're going to be seeing blowing snow at times, and temperatures will be falling to minus 27 this morning, and there's a risk of frostbite because the wind chill is going to be feeling like minus 35 today. Gimli is at minus 4. Dauphin is at minus 7. Steinbach and Morris is at minus 6, and the Pembina Valley region will be mainly cloudy with a chance of flurries throughout the day, and then the west blowing wind will become light this afternoon. You're heading to a high of minus 4. But right now, Winnipeg is at minus 4.
Thank you, Abby.
You're welcome.
Corey Funk, we have problems out there.
Yes, westbound Highway 1 from 207 to 206. So that's right between the Center of Canada Park and Deacon's Corner is closed right now due to a motor vehicle collision. Got a call from Maria who says that your best bet to get around it is by taking Highway 207 through Lorette to get into Winnipeg. If you try to take a gravel road, no dice, you're going to be blocked. So look out for that. Thanks for that call, Maria. Also, here in the city, got a call from RuPaul who says, McPhillips, when you turn eastbound onto William, as pretty much as soon as you turn eastbound there, she didn't know how to describe it other than calling it a lump. Or maybe, I don't know, an inverse pothole. It's just a big lump of concrete, I guess, right in between those two lanes. On
A
eastbound.
heave.
Yeah, a heave? I don't know. I've never...
I don't know.
Usually they're the
we
other
need
way
a new
around.
word.
So, yeah,
we need a new traffic word.
Scientifically, inverse pothole makes sense to me, but I don't know.
An inverse pothole.
Yes, I know. Fancy, right?
Yeah.
If you have any updates
I think
on that,
lump's
though.
better.
Yeah, just a lump.
She's right.
Yeah, exactly. So if you see anything, if you have an update on that lump, or maybe have an idea, a better name for it, give me a call on the CBC commuter line. Let me know what you're seeing out there. That number 204-788-3093.
Can we please just take a second to talk about how great it was to be at the Weston Cultural Center last night?
That was amazing.
So the Current did its show live. We're going to hear actually actually, a little bit of a preview, sneak peek. It airs this morning at 8:37. It was about all things Manitoba, celebrating Winnipeg, and I just loved it. William Prince performed live. Corey and I were in the crowd there, so lucky enough to be there. And I have to say, after 7, we'll give you that sneak peek of what it was like. But I also just love, Corey, I don't know about you, but being in the Weston Cultural Centre, packed like that to the rafters, just on a Tuesday night, to be out and about in Winnipeg, it felt really good.
Yeah, and the cool thing is just everyone's there to just talk about Manitoba and Winnipeg together. Like there's kind of this kind of neat sense of solidarity. We're all kind of there just to learn and listen and
be proud
and just have a good time. It was a really upbeat vibe, and like to see William Prince live was just amazing.
Yeah, he's incredible.
He's
so we will give that sneak peek to you. I know a lot of you were hoping to go, and it sold out so quickly. So we have that for you. And remember, The Current, you're going to hear all of it coming up at 8:37. It is 21 minutes to 7 o'clock now. Phil DeMont joins us with our business report. Good morning.
Hi, Marcy.
So let's talk U.S. inflation. It came in yesterday, the numbers higher than expected. Stock markets dropped. Why was such a big reaction?
Yeah, I find it kind of interesting because it was a big reaction to a relatively small number. Analysts now think, though, that the U.S. Federal Reserve will not start cutting interest rates until June at the earliest. American inflation for January, 3.1%. It was down from the revised December number, 3.4%. But January was above where analysts thought it would be. So investors started selling on Tuesday because they now think, and probably rightly so, that interest rates will be around longer than anticipated. Dow was off 1.25%. NASDAQ was down almost 2%. The big loser was the TSX, down 2.25%. Common wisdom, the U.S. Federal Reserve has to see the inflation numbers come down by a greater amount. They're kind of flattening out before they want to cut interest rates. They don't want to be wrong and cut them too quickly. That's the real running theory right now. So basically, economists were saying at the beginning of the year, like March would be a number or a month you'd look for. Now they're saying maybe July. Same in Canada. There's a greater than 50% chance that the Bank of Canada now will cut interest rates, but think of the late summer, early fall, that kind of timing. And that's a bigger problem for our economy because we're expected to grow slower than the U.S., much slower actually, and higher interest rates for a longer period. This country could hurt our GDP growth even more. Our inflation numbers, Canada's inflation numbers, they come out next Tuesday.
All right, we'll see what they're going to say next week. Let's turn to airfares in Canada and in the U.S. In both countries, they're down. Why do experts, though, say that situation's not going to last?
Well, mainly because summer's coming up and you got a lot of traveling then because airlines still lack enough planes and pilots to keep travelers moving in those months. Now, airfares in the U.S. in January dropped almost 6.5%. In Canada, the average price for a plane ticket in December was down almost 10% compared to December 2022. Now, January is usually a down month for travel. It's after Christmas. That partly explains the price drop south of the border. In Canada, 2023 saw fewer people flying than 2022, mainly because experts think slowing economy and higher inflation reduce travel budgets, the usual idea. Summer's a problem, though, because airlines still suffer from capacity issues. Pratt & Whitney I think it was September, recalled some of their airplane engines. That means some of the jets are not going to be in the sky as quick as you'd like. Also, Boeing, with all those 737 problems, that's delayed plane deliveries from that company, so tight capacity just became tighter. You also have the pilot shortage. Smaller gap than in previous years, Canada issuing more licenses, but in the U.S. there are about 12,000 fewer pilots right now on active duty than necessary, and all that means when it comes together, when you get more people in the air in the summer, higher fares.
And why are the makers of Build-A-Bear and Squishmallows fighting?
Yeah, I know. This is a cage match I'd pay money for. They're upset.
Where no one gets hurt because everyone's puffy.
Yeah, exactly. They'll slap each other and then roll over. Build-A-Bear has a squishy plush toy, and Squishmallow says it looks too much like their squishy plush toy. I didn't even know these were things until I looked at this article.
They're a huge thing, yeah.
I know. Squishmallow is really popular to the degree Lady Gaga has a collection. She probably has the winking Pikachu, but not Avery the mallard duck. I looked these things up. Been around since 2017. Squishmallows have sold more than $100 million. So this month, Build-A-Bear decided to launch its own cuddly plush doll. So this week, Kelly Toys, which owns Squishmallows, filed a lawsuit, says it's just a blatant ripoff of their toy, and they do look pretty similar when you see them on the internet. Build-A-Bear countersued, more or less saying, look, you can't copyright a plush doll design. It's kind of dumb. Made me look for other toy legal fights. Back in 1997, Mattel sued MCA Records over the song Barbie Girl, now think of that, and that'll give you an earworm for the day. MGA Entertainment sued Louis Vuitton over its Pui Patui purse, but the one I like, U.S. Supreme Court. The Supreme Court ruled that a poop-themed dog toy too closely resembled a bottle of Jack Daniel's whiskey.
I can't even begin to think about how I would Google that one safely. Let's just leave that there. All right, let's look at markets this morning, Phil. What are they telling us?
Sure. Right now, Europe, UK's good inflation seems to be pushing out the US bad inflation. So Germany, France, and the UK up more than 0.5%. Shanghai's closed, but Hong Kong was up close to 1%. Oil up 20 cents, $78.07 US a barrel, and the Canadian dollar. Bad day yesterday, up slightly today, trading at 73.89 cents US.
All right, Phil, thank you.
Thanks, Marcy.
With business news, that's Phil Lamont. Brad, Nabby, and Corey behind the glass this morning. I'm Marcy Marcusa. This is Information Radio. Thanks for joining us on CBC live in downtown Winnipeg on 89.3 FM, 990 AM on the app or on YouTube. Good morning, everybody. Still feeling pretty mild out there, actually. Not too bad. -4 in Winnipeg, cloudy. Today we're going to be around -4 for the day. We won't change much, but we will have a 60% chance of flurries with us in our forecast. So note that. Call us if you see any problems. We know that Highway 1 at Deacon's Corner, there had been a collision there earlier, so that was closing westbound lanes of Highway 1. If you are through the area, please let us know if that's clear now or what you're seeing. So 788-3093 is our traffic and commuter line. Well, Indian City's new album is in the works. This is their first since band founder Vince Fontaine died in 2022. So they've put out their first single for us to listen to. This is new music from Indian City. It's called Strawberries and Champagne.
Buy me a cup of coffee and I'll be your best friend. And if you scratch my back, well, you get everything. Sooner or later, things will just right themselves, you see. Rather than backseat driving, won't you ride up front with me? I say, seasons need to change. If you're waiting for rainbows first, you have to put up with the rain. I said, oh, sweet pleasure and sweet pain. Your hand in mine, side by side, strawberries and champagne. Life is complicated business. We do what we can. Follow the road laid out by all our moms and dads. And the highs and lows, and the sticks and stones in our castles of steel and glass. Nothing lasts forever, baby. All this too shall pass. I say, seasons need to change. If you want a rainbow first, you have to put up with the rain. I said, oh, sweet pleasure and sweet pain. Your hand in mine, side by side, strawberries and champagne. Raise a glass 'cause we made it through. Here's to me and you. Seasons need to change. If you want a rainbow first, you have to put up with the rain. I said, oh, 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 sweet weather and sweet pain. Your hand in mine, side by side, strawberries and champagne. Your hand in mine, side by side, strawberries and champagne.
Yay, Indian City with new music, such a celebrated local group. So that is Strawberries and Champagne. It's a sneak peek off their new album, and their next album is going to be out in full in May, so we can look forward to that. It's 11 minutes now to 7 o'clock on 89.3 FM, 990 AM on the app or on YouTube. I'm Marcy Marcusa. Thank you so much for joining us this morning. Our director, Corey Funk, has been busy looking back in the archives so we can remember Kenny Plain properly this morning. And we're going to do that after 7 o'clock. We found a really nice interview that we had with CBC Manitoba and Kenny Plain, so we'll play part of that around sports for you. Speaking of sports, Scott Regehr here. If you're a regular listener, then you know at 7:25. So that's all coming up in the next hour of the show. Also in the next hour of the show, turning to serious matters at 10 to 8, we're going to ask the Families Minister, the Provincial Minister of Families in this province, what solutions she'd like to see when it comes to intimate partner violence. And this comes, of course, after a father has been accused of killing 5 people, including his children and their mother. Those are the 5 deaths, of course, that happened from the family from Carmen over the weekend. So we're going to have a discussion with Nahani Fontaine in the next hour of Information Radio, so stay with us. Right now, new research from the Angus Reid Institute suggests that opinions in Canada are shifting somewhat when it comes to the current Israel-Hamas war. In surveys by the Institute conducted first in November and then again this month, respondents were asked if their sympathies rest more with, quote, the Israelis or the Palestinians, end quote. About a third of respondents say their sympathies are about. Talk about it, Dave Krasinski. He's research director at the Angus Reid Institute. Good morning.
Good morning. Thanks for having me.
So as a starting point here, Dave, how was the poll conducted?
So this is a national survey done on Angus Reid Forum, which is a panel of tens of thousands of Canadians. We talked to 1,610, and we wanted to really do a follow-up, as you mentioned, from that November survey because a lot of things have changed, and Canadians have quite diverse views on this issue. And I think it's important to speak to different groups. And one of the things that we did with that in mind was we ensured that we actually spoke to at least 100 Muslim Canadians and 100 Jewish Canadians to see, how religious affiliation and potential tendencies on that affect this issue. And I thought that was really interesting as well.
Have you done that before? Been that targeted?
We have done that before, but usually we'll do it on a study where we're looking at something that involves faith communities, and we'll compare it across a number of different faith backgrounds. And we actually did it for the first iteration of this study, and what kind of yields is an ability to look at the fact that there's no group that really is a monolith. While you might have kind of a predisposition on this, if you look at the responses from Jewish Canadians, for example, 70% say that their sympathies are primarily with Israel, but 1 in 5 say their primaries are split evenly on both sides, and then 1 in 10 say that they actually have more sympathy for the Palestinian cause as this has played out. So it gives you just a bit of a window into the fact that, we do have these diverse views, and despite the protests and the counter-protests and the conversation online, maybe we are a little bit more open to talking to each other than it might seem.
What did the data suggest about how attitudes around the conflict have changed over time then? Can you give us the top-line data and what you found?
Yeah, certainly. I think that the trend is that the number of Canadians who think that the response from Israel after the Hamas attacks on October 7th, they feel like the response is a little bit heavy-handed. That's up about 5 points from November. And what we see is that seems to have pushed the overall sympathies from leaning toward Israel by about 10 points to being basically about completely even. 1/4 say they're more sympathetic to the Israeli cause, 1/4 to the Palestinian cause, and 33% about equal. So we're quite almost evenly divided in how we're viewing this conflict now on the number of different ways that you can look at it.
I just want to readdress a number, and I apologize if you said this and I missed it. 19% said they weren't sure or they didn't say in respondents.
Yes.
What do you make of that?
Yeah, it's consistently about 1 in 5 say that they're not sure. And I think that's if you look at another question like how closely are you following this, it's about 3/4 who are following it closely, about 80% who say that it's important to them. So there does appear to be about 1 in 5 Canadians who just aren't following this particularly closely and are just refraining from weighing in. Which we appreciate as researchers. You don't have to say which side you're on or how you're viewing this. If you don't know, then please just tell us you don't know. It helps us to understand the data better.
What does your data suggest about how Canadians feel about the federal government's response to the conflict?
I think that they would assess it as maybe a little bit uneven. The sense seems to be if you ask a question like, is the government doing a good job of communicating its position on this? 27% of Canadians feel like it's done a good job, whereas more than half say it's done a poor job. And I think that it is a challenging issue, and you have heard the government trying to not necessarily play both sides, but refrain from taking strong positions. You heard Justin Trudeau early in the conflict, refusing to use the term ceasefire for a very long period of time. Canadians really do support a full ceasefire at this point, and I think they're kind of looking to the government for leadership on this and not necessarily satisfied with what they're getting.
Sorry, Dave, what makes you say that Canadians support a ceasefire?
Well, that number that want a full ceasefire has
out of
jumped
your data in your survey, is
that
right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, it's jumped from 30 to 49% for full ceasefire. 17% now think that we need another temporary pause just to kind of take the temperature, maybe get some civilians out of the way. And I think a lot of people are seeing some of the damage and the collateral damage right now and saying we've got to put an end to this. So about 2/3 supporting some form of ceasefire at this point.
A lot of people are writing to us, with deep concerns about our coverage of this conflict. And I suspect that will continue from both sides. But I want to ask you why you did this. Like, is this part of a different approach? Like, did you do this on the Russia-Ukraine conflict, for example, or is that a plan in the future? Is it a new way of gauging opinions? I just don't recall in the past ever doing this on a conflict like this.
Yeah, we actually have been looking at Russia-Ukraine over the course of, we did a 2-year piece a couple of weeks ago because we're coming up to the 2-year anniversary and wanted to see how views have changed. And one of the things that we've seen there is, for example, the trend of conservative opposition to funding Ukraine. That is something that has really built up over time. What we can do here in tracking this conflict is kind of look at how views are changing and some of the issues about how the government is responding. I think that it helps to understand how people are feeling, even if something like the South Africa case claiming genocide is being perpetrated by Israel. Our government hasn't really taken a firm position on that. They're trying to refrain from commenting. That's a position that is actually quite popular with the Liberal supporters that we see in the survey. Half of them say take no public position, but half of them also, or 2 in 5 of them, would like the government to take a firm stand and say that genocide is happening. So there's all these different elements at play here, and we want to try to understand them. And yes, this is something that we are trying to track over time. And when Canada has kind of a role or an interest in international conflict, we would definitely want to look at that.
Where can people find the full details of the survey?
Yeah, it's at angusreid.org, and it's right up on the front page. So it's a lot there to look at if people are interested in reading some more.
All right. Thank you very much for your time this morning.
No problem. Thank you.
Dave Korzinski is a research director at the Angus Reid Institute. It is 3 minutes to 7 o'clock. Let's go to Heather Wells now for a local news update and headlines.
Good morning. Well, last summer's strike at Manitoba Liquor and Lotteries cost the corporation around $10 million. That's an estimate based on projected sales had the month-long labor dispute not happened. Corporation CEO Jerry Sewell says there were also added costs like hiring replacement workers, not to mention the impact on employees' lives, finances, and mental wellness. celebrating the Year of the Dragon. Some 600 people at a Lunar New Year banquet hosted by the Winnipeg Chinese Cultural and Community Center. Tina Chen, professor of Chinese history at the University of Manitoba, says the dragon is known for strength, power, and wisdom. And she adds the wood dragon brings growth and reinvigoration. All of that for you this year. And we'll have more of that for you coming up in our next local news at 7:30.
I'll take it. Can't go wrong with some reinvigoration. Thanks, Heather.
You're welcome.
We have issues in traffic. Highway 1 still closed westbound at Deacon's Corner. An incident there. 788-3093 if you need us. -4 in Winnipeg. Cloudy. Will be around that temperature for most of the day. Chance of flurries for us as well. In the next hour of Information Radio, we are going to dip into a bit of a preview. What a night last night. Sold out at the West End Cultural Centre. William Prince performing and featuring our community at its finest to a national audience on the Current. So we'll hear part of that. Also, the Families Minister will join us to talk more about what happened in Carmen and the deaths of the 5 people. Stay tuned.
On the Current. We've got a special live show for you today in front of a live audience in Winnipeg, including music by Juno nominee William Prince, an interview with the Manitoba Premier Wab Kinew, and we'll look at the wave of Indigenous-led developments that are changing the conversation about reconciliation.
You leave me breathless.
The Current with Matt Galloway. This morning at 8:37, 9:07 in Newfoundland, and on the CBC Listen app.
Leaves me so helpless. You leave me.
This is World Report. Good morning. I'm Marcia Young. Thousands of gig workers around the world are planning to strike today. They will be refusing rides on Uber and Lyft, refusing to make deliveries on DoorDash and Skip the Dishes. As Nisha Patel tells us, they are demanding fairer pay and better working conditions.
It is becoming more and more precarious.
Brice Sofer won't be delivering takeout today. He's one of the thousands of gig workers who will strike, calling for fair pay and better working conditions.
I had a shift last week where I went out for 2 hours and I made $5.40.
These gig workers offer rides and drop off food through platforms like Uber, Lyft, and DoorDash. Many say they're making way below minimum wage, while the platform collects a big cut from what each customer pays. Viet Vu studies the digital economy at Toronto Metropolitan University. He says if the strikes are big enough, they could have an impact.
Companies will have no choice but to find ways to bring workers back to the table so that these services and these disruptions aren't there anymore.
Demonstrations are expected from London to Los Angeles and in Toronto, Winnipeg, and Vancouver. But companies like Uber say the vast majority of their drivers are satisfied. Traditionally, gig workers have been classified as independent contractors, not subject to the usual employment standards. Sofer says that needs to change and hopes the strikes will help the cause.
Workers just cannot afford to live where they work. And increasingly, they can't afford to even live.
Ontario and BC have introduced new legislation to protect gig workers, though the rules are not yet in force. Nisha Patel, CBC News, Toronto.
Federal Environment Minister Stephen Guilbeault is drawing more criticism from some provincial leaders. He says Ottawa will not invest in new road infrastructure, and that's a problem for the premiers of Ontario and Alberta. Let's bring in Janice McGregor from our Parliamentary Bureau. And Janice, what exactly is the Environment Minister saying?
Marcia, the federal Liberals have bet big here, right? Put down billions of dollars to encourage investment in electric vehicle supply chains, arguing it's absolutely the right path to a sustainable long-term future for Canada's automotive sector and absolutely required to meet the world's carbon emission targets. But in remarks Monday to a lunchtime fundraising event in Montreal for public transit advocacy group Trajectoire Quebec, Environment Minister Stephen Guilbeault said it would be an error to overestimate the ability of EVs to solve climate change. He warned it could be a false utopia that may let us down over the long term. And he told the event it's time for all levels of government to make the hard decision to stop expanding road networks. More roads, more lanes only encourages more driving, more congestion, he said. And so the federal government won't invest in it anymore. The current road network, he said, is perfectly adequate for Canada's needs. Gilbo's promoted more active transit, biking, walking, more public transit his entire career, first as an environmentalist, now as a politician. And so, in a sense, what he's saying here isn't really new or surprising from him, but it does feel like a political poke in the eye to provincial and municipal politicians who are still prioritizing road construction.
So what kind of response is he getting from premiers?
Alberta Premier Daniel Smith took to social media to blast Gilbo's idea that we should all just walk more. Does this minister understand that most Canadians don't live in downtown Montreal? Most of us can't just head out the door in the snow and rain and just walk 10 kilometres to work each day, Daniel Smith wrote. And Ontario Premier Doug Ford, whose Conservative government campaigned on building more roads to ease congestion in the Greater Toronto Area, he also posted that Ontario's government will build highways with or without assent from the feds.
Thank you, Janice.
You're welcome.
The CBC's Janice McGregor in Ottawa. NATO defense ministers are meeting in Brussels. Secretary General Jens Stoltenberg is trying to limit the damage from Donald Trump's comments over the weekend.
Any suggestion that we are not standing up for each other, that we are not going to protect each other, that does undermine the security of all of us, increasing the risks. And therefore it is so important that we, both in actions but also in words, communicate clearly that we stand by NATO's commitment to protect and defend all allies.
Trump said last week if he is re-elected U.S. president, he will insist all NATO countries spend 2% of their GDP on their military. He said if they did not do that, the U.S. would not intervene if delinquent countries were attacked by Russia. Votes are being counted in Indonesia. The polls are now closed on the country's presidential election. An early unofficial tally shows Defense Minister Prabowo Subianto has a 58% lead. He needs more than 50% of all the votes to avoid a runoff election. Millions of people cast their ballots in what has been a controversial campaign. Former General Subianto served as a special forces commander under a brutal dictatorship 25 years ago. His running mate is the son of current President Joko Widodo. Many voters are angry that Widodo put his son on the ballot despite not meeting the age requirement. Some observers fear Widodo is building a dynasty while chipping away at democracy. It could take up to a month for all the votes to be counted. British Columbia's wine industry is facing catastrophic crop losses. A prolonged cold snap in January has damaged vineyards across the Okanagan Valley. As Brady Strachan reports, that could mean hundreds of millions of dollars in lost revenue.
Basically, we make a really nice thin cut layer by layer until we reach to the real bud.
Agriculture Canada research scientist Ben Ming Cheng carefully slices through the buds on a grapevine. Under magnification, the cell tissue should be green in a healthy plant. But sample after sample Cheng looks at are all turning up brown.
When the temperature drops, they will kill the cells. When the ice formed in those cells, they will actually burst those cells.
Cheng says of all the 200 samples he's examined, he's yet to find a live bud. His findings match a recent report that predicts 97% crop failure across the province from January's cold snap.
Just to put it in a very stark term, companies don't survive when they don't have product.
John Boynton is president of Arterra Wines Canada. The company owns several estate wineries in BC. He says this extreme winter damage comes on the heels of a cold snap last winter that killed off half the grape crop in BC.
I think it's safe to say that there's fairly widespread panic. You're going to see potentially a lot of ruined businesses.
The BC wine industry estimates a loss of up to $445 million in revenue this year. It's calling on all levels of government to help find solutions, including allowances for BC wineries to import grapes from other regions, something that's currently not allowed for wines carrying the VQA designation. Brady Strachan, CBC News, Kelowna.
Bob Marley's story has made it to the big screen. The biopic, Bob Marley, One Love, is in theaters today. While the musician was all about peace, love, and bringing people together, this film has fans and critics divided. Magda Garba-Salase has more.
Won't you help to sing? His music, his name, and his message is widely known. Now a new biopic is diving into some of the details of Bob Marley's life. His son, Ziggy Marley, is one of the producers.
The one love, that philosophy, that idea, the idea for unify humanity
I mean, the message that is missing in the world today. We're bringing that again to the people of the world.
The film focuses on just a few crucial years, kicking things off in 1976 during a time of political violence in Jamaica. As Marley is planning a show to call for peace, there's an assassination attempt on his life. Despite injuries, the show goes on. We then follow Marley's journey to the UK, where he and the Wailers make the Exodus album, and there's a whole new level of success.
It's good to see it happening.
In Toronto, Julian King, the founder of Canadian Reggae World, says it's about time there was a biopic on Marley.
There's a source of pride, in many things. And a Jamaican boy doing what he did, a Rastaman doing what he did.
But many critics feel the movie doesn't hit the mark. Reviews call the film stunted, watered down, and anything but revolutionary. Feeling differently are moviegoers in Toronto that got a first look.
The film was phenomenal.
This movie kind of brought, his soul and what his purpose was.
Spreading that original message of love and peace for the world ahead.
A message perfectly timed for Valentine's Day. Magda Gebre-Selassie, CBC News, Toronto.
Don't worry about a thing. 'Cause every little thing gonna be alright. Singing, don't worry about a thing.
And that is the latest national and international news from World Report. I'm Marcia Young.
Gonna be alright. Rise up this morning, smile with the rising sun. Three little birds, it's by my doorstep.
Man, I listened to a lot of Bob Marley in This Is a True Story, an orange VW bus that my buddy owned. My brain's right back there this morning. Good morning, everyone. Not sure where your brain is, but we're glad you're joining us to start your day here on Information Radio on CBC, 89.3 FM, 990 AM, on the app or on YouTube. Good morning, everybody. In Winnipeg, we're starting with a temperature that we're going to stay with for most of the day. It's actually not going to change much. Abby is in a moment with our forecast for your Wednesday. Valentine's Day. This hour on the program, we are going to start with a beautiful night at the West End Cultural Centre. Last night, it was packed to the rafters, literally. We're going to give you a sneak peek of the live taping of The Current here at the West End Cultural Centre. The audience was treated to a surprise reunion of sorts between William Prince and the Premier. We'll hear more about their relationship. We got a sneak peek of what happened last night. To other serious matters, this hour on the program, just before 8 o'clock, we are going to have an interview and conversation with the Provincial Minister of Families in this province after the death of 5 Manitobans near Carman, Manitoba earlier this week. We're going to ask what solutions Nahanni Fontaine would like to see when it comes to intimate partner violence. So that is conversations coming up just before 8. Right now, let's go to Heather Wells for news updates. Good morning.
Good morning. A Legal Aid Manitoba Commission survey wants to know your opinion of an alleged serial killer. Conducted by Main Street Research, this online poll examines public attitudes towards Jeremy Skibicki. He is charged in the deaths of 4 Indigenous women. We're going to hear from a Vancouver-based criminal defense lawyer coming up. And the PC Energy critic says the firing of Manitoba Hydro's CEO is politically motivated and ultimately will lead to higher hydro bills for Manitobans. We'll hear that as well in our next local news at 7:30.
All right. Thank you, Heather.
You're welcome.
As promised, here is Abby Adeyemi with our forecast.
Good morning once again as you're sipping your morning coffee or tea. The current temperature is at -4 degrees and the skies are mainly cloudy if you look outside. A cozy morning for you, and we're expecting a 60% chance of flurries later in the day. The wind blowing from the west will make it the high get to like -4, which we are currently seeing right now. And as the day winds down, we are in for continuation of this mainly cloudy conditions that we are seeing, and maybe some flurries later, and then the wind will change northwest and will bring the temperatures down to -15. But right now, Winnipeg is at -4 degrees.
Thank you, Abby.
You're welcome.
Corey Funk, we have some issues on the highway.
Yeah, a few things to look out for this morning. First things first, Highway 1 right now, westbound between Deacon's Corner and the center of Canada Park there is now closed because of a motor vehicle accident. Got an update from Gerald who said it seems to involve a bunch of semis, about 4 semis, what he saw as he was driving by eastbound. Looks like it's going to be a while till that is clear. There's some tow trucks on the scene right now, but may still take a while. You can take Highway 207 to get around. Gerald also said he was able to take some gravel roads to get around as well. Sticking around in that area, just a warning for folks. I got a call from Nicole that she saw a car eastbound Highway 52 between Highway 59 and Steinbach that was driving quite erratically, kind of going against traffic for a while. Its hazards were on. Just things didn't seem to be going well for that driver. So just be really careful if you are in that area around Mitchell, Highway 52. Just keep your wits about you. There's a driver that's driving erratically right now. In the city, northbound Lachemodier, just south of Grassy, there's a semi blocking the right-hand lane, and that's catching some folks off guard as you kind of turn around the corner, and that's causing some backup. So keep left to get around that. Maybe slow around there. And finally, RuPaul McPhillips, when you turn eastbound onto William, she saw what she calls a lump. Not sure what else to call it.
RuPaul called, yep.
And there's a not a pothole, but a lump right in between those two lanes there. So just be careful. Eastbound William, just after McPhillips. If you see anything else, give me a call, 204-788-3093.
Well, there is something to be said for being proud of where you're from and also leaning into the successes and challenges, but saying, you know what, we're all here, we all live here, and we're going to stick it out and make it better for all of ourselves and our futures. And that was really the nature of the conversation last night. It was just lovely at the West End Cultural Centre. No better way to celebrate International Radio Day than to watch Matt Galloway tape The Current live on stage with the focus on Manitoba at the West End Cultural Centre. So on stage, we heard from local Indigenous leaders, winter enthusiasts, a food historian, a Ukrainian Winnipegger. They were all talking about, as I alluded to, our province's many challenges, but also things that we are doing to overcome. The show kicked off with the Pride of Peguis First Nation musician William Prince, who performed a number of tunes last night. And I will tell you that right after our show at 8:37 a.m., you'll hear the whole program for those of you that couldn't get tickets last night. But we have a sneak peek right now. So as mentioned, William Prince kicked off the show. He's no stranger to the West End.
Well, this is, I've said for years, my favorite stage in all of Canada, I think, the West End Cultural Centre here, where it all began. It all began for me. It really began with Jason Hooper and just so many good folks, volunteers over the years supporting my shows and filling this room up time and time again. I'm so honored to be here with you all.
Fantastic. You're going to play a song for us. What are you going to sing for us first?
I'll play the first song off my new record, Stand in the Joy. You know, it's an album I wrote about embracing the good things. And the first song isn't a total departure, but it's all about the privilege that it is to mean so much to someone that when you're apart from them, you miss them. You feel that beautiful ache, you know? Is the moon shining bright where you are? Is it even shining at all? Running like a white line down the middle of some old memory. Does the evening unfold in waves, the desire to be nowhere or to go out and range, like a time when it was more than just some old memory? When you miss someone, tears you apart and then some. When you miss someone you love. And is the silence quiet or loud? A lifetime of questions, lost and profound, professing to a silhouette of trees on the ground here in front of me. When you miss someone, tears you apart and then some. when you miss someone you love. Now it's here in your absence, my mind doing backflips, reserve tank running on E. Intergalactic, into the static, searching for a memory. Oh, when you miss someone. Oh, when you miss someone. When you miss someone, tears you apart and then some. When you miss someone you love. When you miss someone you love. When you miss someone you love. When you miss someone you love.
That's really special. Thank you very much. Just stick around for a minute because we have somebody who's going to come up on the stage that you know pretty well. His background is as a CBC journalist. He's a best-selling author. He was a rapper, might still be a rapper, who knows? He's now the first ever First Nations Premier of a Canadian province. Please welcome to the stage, if you would, the Premier of Manitoba, Wab Kinew. You and William go way back. We've known each other for a minute.
You're saying William, but I think you mean Will, who was Big Will on Streets FM, Winnipeg's urban hip-hop radio station back in the day, when I was an up-and-coming rapper trying to get my music played on said radio station. But actually, William was also an up-and-coming med student. And so you should know that in addition to being a wonderfully talented musician, he's also super, super smart. And I think we would all agree that he's found his calling and is making the most of his gifts. But as a person responsible for the provincial healthcare system, just don't rule it out, is all I'm saying to William.
Do you want to offer an assessment of the Premier's talents as an MC back in the day?
You know, I've had the privilege of knowing Wab for some time now, and I love that what we see more of is Wab's truly generous, humorous, incredible, kind side. We're both dads, and I think that's our greatest link that we have in common is how much we care for our boys, and it just goes to say that he would naturally care for our province in the same fashion. So I'm lucky to call Wab Kinew a friend of mine.
It's nice to have you both here.
Thank you.
William, you and I are going to chat a little bit later on. We'll get you back on stage in a few minutes. Thanks again. William Prince, everybody.
It really was a great night of music and interviews. That's the Current Live. It was taped last night. We're giving you a sneak peek at the West End Cultural Centre. It was packed, completely sold out. And you will hear the full episode right after our show this morning. So it's all about Manitoba. I promise, if you want to feel proud about our home, tune in to The Current with Matt Galloway this morning at 8:37 a.m.
Your neighborhood, your community, your country, your world, your news that matters, news that belongs to you. Your World Tonight, every night, 7 days a week on CBC Radio 1, on demand on the CBC Listen app, and everywhere you get your podcasts.
I'm Marcy Marcusa. You are listening to CBC. And before we turn to morning sports, let's actually take a moment to remember a legend in sport in our city. Legendary Bombers quarterback Ken Plain has died. A lot of people know him as Kenny Plain. He was 88 years old. As you probably started hearing yesterday when the news came out, Plain led the Bombers to 4 Grey Cup wins in the late 50s and 60s. He was known for not only excelling as a quarterback, but a defensive back as well. He was inducted into the Canadian Football Hall of Fame back in 1975. We went into the archives this morning because CBC's Ismaila Alpha spoke with Kenny Plain on Up to Speed in 2013. That was when the city of Winnipeg was naming a street for him. Ismaila asked him about his favorite memory with the Bombers.
Well, there's a lot of memories from playing with the Bombers. We had a lot of success over those years. Got great friends. Still have lunch with them on Tuesdays, and it was a great time.
I mean, now you speak of great times with the Bombers of your era, but this has been, a pretty rough season for our team, to say the least. What's the worst that it ever got for you and your Blue Bomber team?
Well, I think we went through a year where we won 1 game and tied 1 and lost 14 or something like that. It wasn't very good, I know that.
So how did you and the team battle back through those low periods?
Well, I think we went to the Grey Cup the following year. We just had a lot of injuries that particular year, and we scored 20 points, and the other team scored 21. We just couldn't win.
Now, if you think back to when you were playing with the team and you look at the CFL today, how big are the changes that you've seen happen in the past few years?
Well, I think over the average-wise, the players are bigger, some of them faster. A lot of good players around the league, no question about that. We had a lot of good players back in our day too, but I think there's a lot of good players out there with a lot of speed, a lot of size.
How do you think you would have fared in today's CFL?
Well, at my age, it wouldn't fare very well.
But if we took the Ken Plain, the quarterback for the Blue Bombers, and were able to get you in a time machine and bring you to 2013, how do you think you'd do?
Well, I'll tell you what, if I could bring back all my teammates with me, we'd do quite well. It's a team game. It's not based on just a quarterback, and you got to have good people around you.
Now, in your days, many of the players made their homes in Winnipeg. I mean, they stayed after their careers were over, like you, for instance. Do you think that makes a big difference for actual players taking ownership of the team?
Well, I always felt, I played up there for 11 years, and we had good success. I had a job. I brought my wife up here. Our children were all born here. It became home. And we get back to the States. I still have a lot of relations and things back there, but we call this home up here now, although we've never given up our citizenship.
Now, our show broadcasts through the whole province, so I'm pretty sure the Blue Bombers will hear this. If you could say anything to them right now to kind of, perk them up and get them through the rest of the season, what's your message to our Blue Bombers?
Well, it's the same old story. You just got to go out, forget the record, the score, or anything else. You go out and you play your best, give it everything you've got, and you let the points fall where they might. Sometimes you can play your heart out, and you just can't win. But there's not much you can do about it.
I'm glad that Kenny Plain got to see the Bombers get good again. Or I should say have success again as they rebuilt the team. That was from 2013, not our best era. Speaking to Ismaila Alpha, CBC's Ismaila Alpha at the time in 2013, Kenny Plain died. The Bombers announced his death yesterday. He was 88. We couldn't help but dig into the archives this morning. People in our city have been talking about it since the news came out yesterday. Let's turn to other sports with Scott Regehr. Hi, Scott.
Hey there, Marcy.
Nice to hear Kenny Plain, hey?
Yeah, and you look at what Bob Irving said yesterday on social media, the longtime voice of the Bombers. Plain was one of the key players for the team's dynasty in the 50s and 60s, revered for his play on the field, yes, and for his kindness and his generosity off the field. So you can really hear that in that interview with Ismaila.
Yeah. Let's actually talk about the pebbled ice right now. One of the greatest of them all is calling it a career.
Here it comes. Jennifer Jones from curling great to curling legend, just like that.
That's the sound, of course, of Winnipeg's Jennifer Jones winning gold at the Sochi Olympics, Marcy, a highlight in a career filled with them. And I use the past tense, filled, since Jones has decided to put away her team curling broom. She's 49 now, Jones. She is considered the greatest female curler in the four-player traditional version of this sport. Olympic gold, 2 world championships, and a half dozen Canadian titles will do that. But she isn't saying an outright goodbye to the pebbled ice. Marcy Jones plans on continuing in mixed doubles alongside her husband, Brent Lang. Nice thought, especially as we celebrate Valentine's Day today.
Yes, well-timed story. Let's go to swimming now. Another late bloomer has Canada's latest medal at the World Aquatic Championships, right?
Yeah, Calgary's Ingrid Wilm with bronze in the 100-meter backstroke. She's 25 now, Wilm. This was her first individual world championship medal. And what a journey it's been for her. As a teen, Marcy, she was regarded as one of the future stars of the sport. But just before the Rio Olympics, she suffered an elbow injury and couldn't compete. By the time the Tokyo Olympics rolled around, she was in financial difficulty, had to rely upon her siblings just to keep her, if you will, afloat in the sport. But it wasn't really until last year at the Canadian Swim Trials where Wilm beat Kylie Mass, the backstroke star in her best discipline, that she served notice that she is back. And Wilm, who grew up in part in Qatar, by the way, called her bronze at the Worlds pretty special.
Those of us that did choose to come, wanted to come to perform, I think it's a great starting off point for this Olympic year. I also think it's, for me personally, it's pretty exciting to get my first individual medal at the place where I started competitive swimming here in Doha, so it feels a bit of a full circle moment right now.
So Ingrid Wilm with a bronze medal, 7 medals total for Canada right now. At the last Worlds, we won 10, so almost there. And before I head off in hockey tonight, the Jets hosting San Jose, looking to add a second win in a row after beating Pittsburgh the last time out. I see Nick Ehlers is going to remain on the first line tonight, while Gabe Velarde was demoted to the second. Puck drop against San Jose at 6:30.
All right, thanks a lot, Scott.
You betcha.
We'll talk to Scott Reguer again tomorrow morning, as always, on Information Radio. In traffic, I should mention, we still understand there could be tow trucks, Highway 1 westbound at Deacon's Corner after an earlier incident. If you need to update that, 788-3093. Coming up after your CBC Winnipeg News, we're going to talk to a local artist, hear from them, who says that the city's decision to cut public art funding is a mistake. And we'll hear more about it after your news.
This is CBC News. Good morning. I'm Heather Wells in Winnipeg at 7:30. We've got some light snow reported now out at the airport. Streets are wet downtown, and it is -4. That is the high for Winnipeg on this Valentine's Day. Legal Aid Manitoba has commissioned an opinion poll of an alleged Winnipeg serial killer. The poll, conducted by Main Street Research, examines public attitudes towards Jeremy Skibicki. He is charged in the deaths of 4 Indigenous women. Anthony Robinson is a criminal defense lawyer based in Vancouver. He says the survey could point to the defense's path moving forward after Skibicki was denied a judge-alone trial last month.
Are they feeling out the waters with respect to a substantive defense, or are they really trying to renew their application to re-elect the judge alone because they feel that Mr. Skibicki would not get a fair trial in the presence of a jury? That's really the main question.
Legal Aid Manitoba would not comment to CBC News about this poll. You can read more about it on our website this morning, cbc.ca/Manitoba. Manitoba's opposition party says the firing of Manitoba Hydro CEO Jay Graywall is an example of how the NDP is interfering with the running of a Crown corporation. Yesterday, it was announced Graywall and Hydro parted ways just 2 weeks after she said the corporation would have to look to private suppliers for future hydro needs. PC energy critic Grant Jackson defends Graywall.
She knew her job could be on the line, but she made those comments publicly anyway because she believed that what she was presenting was the right path forward for Manitoba Hydro, regardless of which political party is in power or ideology.
Jackson says the NDP is being ideologically rigid, adding that ultimately will lead to higher hydro rates for Manitobans because he says in order to meet future power needs, Hydro would have to go further into debt, building new capacity. The deaths of an entire family in Carman have renewed discussions around domestic violence. A 29-year-old man faces 5 murder charges in the deaths of his 30-year-old partner, their 3 young children, and a 17-year-old relative. RCMP would not label the homicides as domestic violence, and that doesn't sit well with some experts, including Tracy Afifi, a professor of community health sciences at the University of Manitoba.
If we don't frame it within the context of intimate partner violence, then I think we are doing a huge disservice. And what we know from homicides in Canada is that it's estimated that about 20% of all homicides in Canada are due to intimate partner violence.
According to Statistics Canada, Manitoba has the second highest rate of intimate partner violence among the provinces. Afifi says more resources are desperately needed to protect and support women and families. Last summer's strike at Manitoba Liquor and Lotteries cost the corporation around $10 million. That number's an estimate based on projected sales if the month-long labor dispute hadn't happened. Corporation CEO Jerry Sewell telling a legislative committee hearing yesterday there were also added costs, like hiring replacement workers, and that's not all.
We all focus on the bottom line, but I think it's most important to focus on kind of how it impacted our employees. Again, this was a significant impact to their lives, whether it's financial, mental wellness, something we didn't want to put our employees through.
Sewell expects liquor and lotteries to make up the lost revenue this year. He says sales for drinks like coolers and ciders are rising. Ukraine's military claims it has sank a Russian vessel in the Black Sea. The Kremlin has yet to comment, but if the claim is verified, it will be the second time in 2 weeks Ukrainian forces have successfully targeted a ship in the Russian fleet. Ukrainian officials say today's strike involved sea drones, and the vessel that sank has the capacity to carry more than 80 crew members. Prince Harry and his wife Meghan Markle are in Whistler, BC, visiting a training facility 1 year ahead of the 2025 Invictus Games. The Duke of Sussex is the founder of the Games for wounded veterans and service personnel. Harry and Meghan will be at the Whistler camp today and tomorrow, and on Friday they will be in Vancouver. You can hear more national and international news coming up on World Report at 8. A packed house at Kumkung Garden restaurant in Winnipeg's Chinatown last night. A Lunar New Year celebration with drumming and a lion dance. More than 600 people were celebrating the Year of the Dragon. Tina Chen is professor of Chinese history at the University of Manitoba.
Each year we always want to bring in and think about good luck, prosperity, and those kind of new relationships. The dragon is known for strength and power and wisdom, so let's hope there's some wisdom in the coming year. And with being the wood dragon, there's a sense that it should be growth and reinvigoration. So that would be really great to see.
Wouldn't it? Chen calls the Lunar New Year the most important celebration of the year. She says it's a time to strengthen family and community connections while enjoying good food. You can find more news updated throughout the morning. Just head to cbc.ca/Manitoba.
Pineapple buns.
Yes.
Pork dumplings, sticky rice. Oh, sorry, my mic's on.
Getting hungry?
Thank you, Heather Wells.
You're welcome.
Abby Adiyemi now with our regional forecast.
Right now, it's currently -4 in the city. Expect a mild Valentine's Day with mostly cloudy skies, and there's a chance of flurries later. The airport is already recording some light snow just for you to know this morning. Moving west to Brandon. Brandon is currently at -11, mostly cloudy with a chance of flurries. The high for today will be -5. Thompson is currently seeing light snow at -20, and you'll be falling to -22 later. Currently, Churchill is at -25. Brace yourself. Today, you'll be seeing a mix of sun and cloud. You're seeing ice crystal currently and blowing snows at times, and temperatures will be falling to -27. This afternoon, we have a risk of frostbite for folks in Churchill. Gimli and the Interlake region, you're seeing some light snow already. You're currently at -6, and you will see this light snow ending later in the morning, followed by mainly cloudy skies, and then you're going to be falling to -7 later in the afternoon. Dauphin is at -8, Steinbach at -5, Maurice at -7, and Winnipeg at -4.
Thank you, Abby.
You're welcome.
Oh, we just got a call on the traffic line, right, Corey?
Right, you answered. Thank you very much for doing that.
You're
Marcel,
welcome.
I was
It's
in
a
here.
team game.
Yes. Steffi called and she said that Highway 1 between the Center of Canada Park and Deacon's Corner is still closed, just westbound right now. That's because there seems to be some collision involving a few semis. Tow trucks are on scene. I heard from Gerald not long ago, but it looks like it still might be a while till that is cleared. You can go around. 207 is the best way to get around. I heard from Maria earlier, but Gerald also says you can take the gravel roads if you need to as well to get into Winnipeg. Thanks for those calls so far. Here in the city, there are a few things to keep an eye out for. Northbound La Jamodier, Richard just called. He said just south of Grassy, there's a semi-truck blocking the right-hand lane. Might still be a problem there. As well, Marcy, I know earlier I was talking about this lump in the road. That's at McPhillips or on eastbound William, just after you turn off from McPhillips. And RuPaul, who called it a lump. I called it an inverse pothole, but I got another call from Ed, who called it a frost boil. It may be a frost boil.
I like that.
That's actually a term. I looked it up. It's a thing. And
which makes sense because it's heaving.
And it happens on a lot of like rural roads especially, but it may be a thing that's happening here. It heaves up, and then eventually it will kind of collapse and become a pothole and eat your tires. So look out for that. That's on eastbound William, just when you turn off of McPhillips, right in between the two lanes. So look out for that. If you see anything else, give me a call on the CBC commuter line. That number 204-788-3093.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Coming up in this half hour, I just hope you stay with us because the Provincial Minister of Families, Nahani Fontaine, is going to join us to talk about what solutions she would like to see when it comes to intimate partner violence. She's been a gender violence advocate for a very long time, and so she'll join us to talk about this, of course, in the backdrop of the deaths that happened in Carman. Next on the show, the Winnipeg Arts Council is in shock, it says, after news that the City of Winnipeg plans to cut funding to the public art program. Now, that was outlined in the city's 2023 draft budget. It effectively, if goes through, will cancel a 20-year program of public art installations across Winnipeg. Now, the budget was reduced from $500,000 in 2018 down to $125,000 in 2022. Jim Agapito from CBC went out in the city to find out what people think about it.
Adeline Sokolsky.
How do you feel about public art in the city?
I would like to see lots of it, if that's possible, if there's money to fund the artists. The more art, the better.
Why do you feel that way?
I think it's just sort of like the outdoors. You go outside to breathe fresh air and be with nature, and I think art just does the same thing. It just feeds your mind and, makes you feel good.
Why did they cut? That's my opinion. I want to know why they feel it necessary. I know their budget is limited. They're looking to save money, but that isn't the way.
Like we're taking a step backwards. Maybe I think it makes the city more interesting. People would come. Sometimes they would come just to see the art.
Absolutely. Showcase our artists.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Yeah.
Well, it just takes away from what the city could offer people. I mean, just the people that live here, let alone tourists. So, and supporting artists. I mean, providing work for artists, I think is very beneficial. And if I had gobs of money, I'd be a patron of the arts. What can I say? But
she already is.
Hi, Martin McCabe.
How do you feel about public art?
I think it's really important for a city, really. It gives a flavour of what the city's all about. So we're visiting from England, so it's nice to be able to see what the art of the city is all about.
Is that something you look for when you go to a new place?
Yeah, we like to walk around cities, and when you're walking around cities, to see art that's accessible to the public is really important.
City of Winnipeg is cutting public arts funding. How do you feel about something when you hear about that?
Well, it's sad news, really. The arts are always one of those areas where funding gets cut, but if you look around, it's if you're not going to have this public art, then it's not going to be as attractive, is it, to a visitor? So it's sad news.
CBC's Jim Agapito asking people how they feel about public art in the city and the recently announced change to funding. Now, Paul Robles is a Winnipeg-based visual artist. He's been part of the Winnipeg Art Council's public art program for nearly 2 decades. Jim also met with him to ask about the impact on the city with this loss.
Oh, it's so important. I think it's because of all the diverse stories that are around in the city. It makes the fabric of the city. You have projects like Ian August's The Rooster Town, which I didn't know anything about Winnipeg and the history of that. And then you have pieces at the Air Canada Park, the Indigenous Park, which I think is amazing. It shows how much diversity there is in this city. Well, again, I started as a young artist, and I got creation grants, like regular grants from the Winnipeg Arts Council. And then early on, they had a call out for bike racks on Broadway. They're still there, and people still, this is probably 2007. So they're still up on Broadway. You can lock your bike up on Broadway on one of my bike racks. And
how does that help with your professional development, as an artist?
Yeah, I just did a piece on Nuit Blanche during COVID. I did inflatables in the Cube, which were a bunch of monkeys light up. And now they're in Waterloo. So they're touring Canada, and it brings the city out towards sort of a national conversation about Winnipeg.
Behind us, we have a project there that you made. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
So the Lights on the Exchange is a product that started last year, and it was commissioned by the Exchange District and Winnipeg Arts Council. My piece is called Murmurations, which is, I used to have a studio at the Bait Building early on, and I remember watching the pigeons and the birds flying in. I was on the top floor, and I would see these birds, and I was reminded about the history of the Exchange, which is sort of, for our Filipino culture, it was sort of like sewing factories, and that used to be the Exchange District. So I thought about migration and immigration, and so that's where this piece comes from. So, and it's great because I believe they're putting it up annually every winter to light up the Exchange. So it brings people down sort of the dark days of winter, and people can have some dialogue and discourse with the piece. So yeah.
What does public art do for you as an artist?
It makes my eyes open to different types of stories and what happened in location and place. It's sort of a stewardship of and civil discourse of where I live. Lots of stories come out of the public artworks, and you see a lot of the public artworks in sort of tourism ads and stuff like that. So I think people should give public artwork a lot more credit than it really is. What's it done for the community? Again, it basically brings people together. It gets people to talk and discourse about subjects and things that are going on that's current in the city. So I mean, that's the most important thing, is to sort of tell the story of the city of Winnipeg. It's almost like a destination. Oh, I'm going to go see that at the Forks. I'm going to go see this piece. Everybody goes to Chicago to see the Bean. I mean, Winnipeg should have that too, right?
The city of Winnipeg does not have any money anymore allocated for public arts funding. How does that make you feel as an artist?
It makes me very nervous because, there's a new generation of artists that maybe won't be able to tell their story of their experience living in the city. And I'm hoping that changes, because, I mean, that's really important for the new generation to, the city will develop and grow, and there'll be brand new stories and brand new things happening. And I think if that gets cut, that's kind of a shame.
How would you respond to someone, that might say, the city has better things to spend money on than public art? What do you say to that person?
It's really about culture and your community. It brings in people to go, why? I want to go see Winnipeg. And I think that's very important also. That part of the city is very important.
What do you say to people who might love a piece of public art while others might hate it?
If it speaks to one person in their life, I think that's really important. Especially if you're a young, someone who's very outside the main society, and they see something that really inspires them. And I don't think that should be discredited at all.
That is the CBC's Jim Agapito speaking with Winnipeg-based Filipino visual artist Paul Robles. A spokesperson for Mayor Scott Gillingham said that some public art funding remains elsewhere in the capital budget. So if you want to react to this or weigh in on public art and its place in your life, and what you love about it, what concerns you about the funding or not being kept at the same level, please weigh in. And if you, in the meantime, want to see a gallery of some of the public artworks in and around Winnipeg, you can always see that on the Winnipeg Arts Council website. It is simply winnipegarts.ca.
There are stories you just can't stop thinking about. They take you somewhere, they introduce you to someone, they share something new with you. Liftoff. Those are the stories you want to share with your friends, and CBC's award-winning documentary team is bringing them to you every week on Storylines. Storylines, new this season on CBC Radio 1, and always on demand on the CBC Listen app.
It is 7:47 a.m. on 89.3 FM, 990 a.m. on the app or on YouTube. Good morning, everyone. I hope your Wednesday's going well. Not sure what you're planning for Valentine's Day, and maybe nothing, maybe something big. Maybe you're eating a McRib. After 8 o'clock, we are going to talk to a Winnipegger who celebrated the return of the elusive McRib. And then, because of the response he got, which he did not expect on Reddit, he decided he would go all in. He ate McRib every day for 14 days. The best part is he wasn't trying to get attention for this. But boy, did he ever. We'll talk to him. That's coming up on the show after 8. Right now, -4 in the city of Winnipeg. Very, very light snow falling as it's brightened up in the downtown, and we're looking for a day where our temperature is going to remain around -4. We do have a 60% chance that flurries will be staying with us this morning. Well, let's turn our attention back to serious matters. According to Statistics Canada, Manitoba, our province, has the second highest rate of police-reported family violence in the country. So how do we change that? Next, we continue our coverage of the deaths in Carman. RCMP have charged a Carman man with 5 counts of first-degree murder. The victims were his 3 children, their mother, and a 17-year-old family member. RCMP declined to call the killings intimate partner violence at this stage. It's a decision that has been criticized by people who work with survivors of domestic abuse. Critics also say that not enough is being done in Manitoba to address domestic violence. In a moment, we'll talk to the Families Minister. First, here's just a minute from Kendra Nixon, professor in the Faculty of Social Work at the University of Manitoba and director of RESOLVE. It stands for Research and Education for Solutions to Violence and Abuse.
Domestic homicide is completely preventable, and we're not taking preventative actions. We tend to respond in very reactive ways. We tend to respond in fragmented ways. We have put the burden of protecting women on women's advocates and shelter workers, and they do amazing jobs, but they are sorely and woefully underfunded and do not have the capacity and are under-resourced. And we put the onus on women for protecting themselves and protecting their children. I mean, we have inquests that have been done. So, for instance, again, I'll speak to the Nova Scotia Mass Casualty Commission. They've spent an enormous amount of time on that tragic situation and have come up with a number of recommendations. One of the first major recommendations is to look at this as in a public health way, right? That this is a societal issue. This is not a women's issue. And so we all have a responsibility to be a part of the solution. We all have a part to play.
As I mentioned, according to StatsCan, our province has the second highest rate of police-reported family violence in the whole country. Nahani Fontaine is with us now, Manitoba's Minister of Families and a longtime gender-based advocate against gender-based violence. Good morning.
Good morning, Anine.
So tell me what you were thinking when you heard about what unfolded in Carman this weekend.
Well, I think like all Manitobans, absolutely devastated to hear what happened in Carman and to those victims. I think that particularly when we're talking about the murder of children, I think that it hits particularly hard. My first reaction is obviously concern for the families impacted, and certainly for the community of Carman, and then certainly for all of us as Manitobans to have such an unspeakable tragedy occur in our province. And I think that, the clip that you played previous to this is very poignant. Like, Manitoba does have some of the highest levels of gender-based violence and intimate partner violence across the country. Manitoba is, in some respects, ground zero for missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls. And so, what happened in the last 72 hours just really highlights that. And, sitting at the RCMP presser, there was, Grand Chief Kathy Merrick and Chief Kennedy and myself and our special advisor. And you can't help but be overwhelmed with emotions and pain and hurt for the families and for the victims and for all of us in Manitoba.
Experts like Nixon say that the research is all there. They say domestic violence is preventable. What action as Families Minister do you want to see, taken now?
Yeah. I mean, certainly we know that this work is not easy. There's no, silver bullet to fix what is an incredibly difficult and widespread issue, my priority as minister responsible is to protect the most vulnerable Manitobans and to take concrete steps in addressing gender-based violence. So one of the things that we did very, very soon after taking office is we established the MMIWG-2F and Gender-Based Violence Committee of Cabinet, which I think we're meeting in the next week and a half on that. Alongside that, we appointed a special advisor on Indigenous women's issues and a secretary to that Gender-Based Violence Committee of Cabinet, because we take this issue seriously. And on that cabinet, we have a variety of different ministers with their departments alongside their DMs to really tackle this issue in a comprehensive and robust way. My priority is to ensure that we are prioritizing the protection of women and children and gender-based folks here in Manitoba.
Can you commit this morning about funding more women's shelters? Kendra Nixon says women's shelters are under-resourced. You know this. What can you commit to this morning that your government can do? Within even a timeline. I mean, how many more shelters can you commit to, just even to look at something concrete?
Yeah. So last week I was actually in Ottawa. There was an Indigenous federal, provincial, territorial meeting in respect of MMIWG, 2F and gender-based violence, and had some preliminary discussions with some federal counterparts about shelters across the country, certainly here in Manitoba, and looking at the funding. Shelters just got an increase to their overall operations, which has helped significantly shelters to be able to take on more women and families that are in need of shelters when they need it immediately. And I have been meeting with our shelters and those that are on the front lines for many, many years, and certainly, obviously, as minister responsible, that's one of my priorities. What I can commit to is that we're actively working with those that are on the front lines, including shelters, at looking at how we can best support Manitoba women and families to get the supports when they need it. As everybody knows, we have to ensure that there are spaces and places that women and their children can go to ensure that they're safe. Coupled with that, right, if you look at shelters, that's after the fact, right? That's downstream. I'm really interested in, and have always been very interested in how we engage with men to do this work. Your previous speaker spoke about that this isn't a women's issue. I've been saying this for the last 25 years. We need men to step up to also take that responsibility to tackle this issue. And as well, coupled with that, is the supports that we have for men and boys to help them also get a handle on their anger or whatever issues they may be going through that contribute, quite honestly, to gender-based violence. So to me, the way that I see it is a multi-pronged approach coming at it at all different levels.
There may be, Minister, with respect to what you're saying, people listening this morning that feel like the time for conversation and engagement will always be important, but the time for action is now. Manitobans are hearing about women and children being killed. And they want maybe a more firm commitment, like, okay, we're going to boost shelters by 50%, and here's where they're going to go, and this is why. Here's the funding behind it. Why can't we get more concrete movement on this?
And let me just disabuse you on that. We are taking concrete actions on gender-based violence. There is a eradicating gender-based violence national action plan. So Manitoba signed on to that last July, I believe. And so that's an ongoing commitment and partnership between the federal government and the provincial government. And that is, I think, at the end of the day, over 4 years, the federal government will give about $22 million to Manitoba to deal with gender-based violence. And we've this whole last year have been funding amazing community groups in the community on the front lines to tackle gender-based violence, including funding some men's groups. So there are concrete actions happening right now. Is it enough? Obviously not. The last 72 hours have shown us that we have a lot of work, urgent work to be doing right now to protect Manitobans. And we are doing that in the way that we're looking at our Committee of Cabinet, the NAP funding that we're doing, and certainly the outreach that I've been doing personally as Minister responsible.
Thank you very much for your time on CBC today. We appreciate it.
Miigwech.
That's Nahanni Fontaine, Manitoba's Minister of Families. Here's Heather Wells.
Good morning. A Legal Aid Manitoba Commission survey wants to know your opinion of an alleged serial killer. The survey is conducted by Main Street Research, and it examines public attitudes towards Jeremy Skibicki. He is charged in the deaths of 4 Indigenous women. We're going to hear from a Vancouver-based criminal defense lawyer coming up in our next local news. And the PC Energy critic says the firing of Manitoba Hydro CEO is politically motivated and ultimately will lead to higher hydro rates for Manitobans. I'll be back with more Manitoba news at 8:30.
Thank you very much, Heather. That's Heather Wells at our CBC News Desk. Take a look at your commute right now. Highway number 1 west between the Centre of Canada Park and Deacon's Corner closed right now due to a motor vehicle collision. You can take Highway 207 to get around that. That's the biggest issue right now out there on the roads. If you see anything else, you can give me a call on the CBC commuter line, 204-788-3093. Still to come, Marcy will be back to give you the story of a Winnipegger who's celebrating the return of the elusive McRib by eating it every day for 14 days straight. We're going to hear why and why the internet seems to love what he's doing here in Winnipeg. That story coming up and much, much more after the World Report. See you then.
Today on Q with Tom Power.
A new biopic is coming out about Bob Marley. It's called Bob Marley One Love, and it focuses on Bob's life in the late 1970s. Ronaldo Marcus Green is the director of the film. He'll be here to tell you about why he wanted to tell Bob's story.
One love, one art, one destiny.
That's coming up on Q, followed by Commotion with Elamine Abdel Mahmoud on CBC Radio 1, the CBC Listen app, and everywhere you get your podcasts.
The CBC News is next. Coming up in half an hour, it's The Current with Matt Galloway.
We've got a special live show for you today in front of a live audience in Winnipeg, including music by Juno nominee William Prince, an interview with the Manitoba Premier, Wab Kinew, and we'll look at the wave of Indigenous-led developments that are changing the conversation about reconciliation.
This is World Report. Good morning. I'm Marcia Young. Donald Trump's recent comments have already been raised at a NATO defense ministers meeting in Brussels. The Republican frontrunner said if NATO members do not spend enough on defense, they should not be guaranteed protection from the alliance. And he took it even further, saying he would even encourage Russia to attack. Briar Stewart has more reaction.
As defense ministers begin to meet in Brussels, the Secretary General of NATO, Jens Stoltenberg, pointed out that spending among member countries has risen dramatically since Russia's invasion.
This year, I expect 18 allies to spend 2% of their GDP on defense.
31 countries are currently part of NATO, and Sweden is expected to be formally admitted to the alliance soon. While U.S. President Joe Biden called Trump's comments dumb and dangerous, Stoltenberg took a more measured tone.
So any suggestion that we are not standing up for each other, that we are not going to protect each other, that does undermine the security of all of us.
Canada is near the bottom of the list when it comes to spending among NATO members. According to the alliance, Canada spent just under 1.4% of its GDP last year on defense, well below the 2% target.
Who knows what else candidate Trump will say?
Ben Barry is a senior fellow of land warfare at the International Institute for Strategic Studies and says NATO countries need to be spending more to ramp up military production.
To fill in the holes in the road. There are many weaknesses of readiness, such as stockpiles and ammunition and spare parts that the Ukraine war has shown up.
Part of the meetings underway in Brussels will focus on additional help for Ukraine. While on the battlefield, Ukraine has been mostly on the defensive. It has been able to launch successful attacks at Russian targets by using drones. And today, Ukrainian officials say their military destroyed a large Russian landing ship in the Black Sea. Briar Stewart, CBC News, London.
Thousands of gig workers across the globe say they are going on strike today. They will not be turning on their apps to accept rides on platforms like Uber and Lyft or deliveries from companies like DoorDash and Skip the Dishes. The workers are demanding fairer pay and better working conditions. Bryce Soffer has been a gig worker since 2015. He says last week he made less than $6 working for 2 hours.
I live in Toronto, which we know is one of the most expensive cities in Canada and actually one of the most expensive cities in the world. And those types of earnings are just completely do not meet the needs of people who live in this city.
Some experts say if the protests are big enough, companies will be forced to renegotiate with workers. Ontario and British Columbia have both introduced legislation to protect gig workers. The new rules are not in force yet. In India, police used drones to drop tear gas on farmers gathered near the Punjab-Haryana border. It is day 2 of their march to Delhi, but they're stuck. Police and security block them from crossing. They are angry that the government has not kept its promise for better compensation for their crops. This man with the Farmers Union says the government should accept our demands or democratically give us the right to go to Delhi. The farmers want minimum price guarantees for some of their crops. They say they will stay at the border until their demands are met. Indonesia's defense minister has claimed victory in the country's presidential election. Prabowo Subianto has been officially declared the winner, and his opponents have not conceded. But an early unofficial tally shows him in the lead. The former general was once part of the dictatorship of the country. His unit was accused of torture and kidnappings. Allegations Subianto denies. The election has been criticized by many as the current president puts his son on the ballot as Subianto's running mate. Some Indonesians fear Joko Widodo is trying to secure political dynasty through his son and fear it puts the country's democracy at risk. For the first time in 150 years, a U.S. cabinet secretary has been impeached. The vote against Homeland Security Secretary Alejandro Mayorkas has won by a very slim margin. House Republicans accuse Mayorkas of high crimes for his handling of the U.S.-Mexico border. The CBC's Richard Madden joins me from Washington. And Richard, what does this mean?
Okay, so all eyes will be on the Senate because Mayorkas will soon face a trial there, but Democrats hold a slim majority, so a conviction is highly unlikely. Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer could either punt it off to a committee or move a motion to just acquit Mayorkas altogether. Once again, a conviction is highly unlikely. But House Republicans achieved what they wanted to, pushing that resolution to impeach Mayorkas with just a single vote, putting them over the finish line. But the far-right flank of the Republican Party prevailed, impeaching Mayorkas over what they claim is his failure to secure the southern border and enforce immigration laws. Here's Georgia Republican Marjorie Taylor Greene.
To send the message to the Biden administration that it's our border that matters.
Now, moderate Republicans, Democrats, and most constitutional experts say this is more of a policy dispute that doesn't meet the bar of high crimes and misdemeanors. In a statement last night, President Joe Biden called the impeachment vote a, quote, petty political game, adding history will not look kindly on Republicans for their unconstitutional partisanship.
Richard, a big election in New York yesterday to replace disgraced Republican Representative George Santos. Tell us about the significance of that vote.
Yeah, it's a big deal because the House Republicans' razor-thin majority just got even smaller. Democrats are projected to flip that seat held by disgraced Republican George Santos, who was expelled by Congress in December. Now, both parties poured huge money into the suburban swing district in Long Island that had typically been a safe Democratic seat, but issues like immigration and crime made it competitive. But this decisive win by Tom Susie is good news for Democrats, hoping for them it's a glimpse of the national mood heading into November. Once he's sworn in, the Republican House majority goes down to 2, leaving them little room for error to advance their agenda.
All right, thank you, Richard.
Thank you.
The CBC's Richard Madden in Washington. The president of the Canadian Border Services Agency is saying there were failings in the development of the ArriveCan app. It was developed to streamline border crossings at the height of the pandemic. But record keeping was so bad, Canada's Auditor General could only guess at the total cost. She estimates taxpayers paid nearly $60 million for ArriveCan. CBSA President Erin O'Gorman was questioned by MPs yesterday.
The absence of documentation is what is giving rise to these serious questions. Without a doubt, people were moving fast, but that doesn't justify cutting and pasting contracted resources experience directly from statements of work or collaborating with a company on a document they will eventually build on.
O'Gorman joined the CBSA after the ArriveCan app was developed. Her agency is conducting an internal investigation. The vacation rental app Vrbo says it is working to take down its Super Bowl commercial under pressure from Newfoundland and Labrador's tourism department. The ad does not actually show any scenes of the province, but it does show a nightmare vacation rental set to the tune of a traditional folk song. That's causing offense, and as Heather Gillis reports, the province is now airing an ad of its own.
Newfoundland and Labrador's tourism department is now fighting back against Vrbo with an ad of its own, showcasing what it calls the real Newfoundland and Labrador. An ad using the same song, sending a very different message.
This looks like an actual farm.
It looks cute on the app.
This Vrbo ad aired during the Super Bowl, using Eyes the Buys, a popular traditional Newfoundland folk song. It shows farm animals making a mess all over a vacation rental and disappointed travelers. It's angered Kirk Saunders.
It's upsetting. It brings on feelings of being disrespected.
It's personal for Deborah Borden, a tourism operator in Twillingate, one of the towns named in the song.
Whoever did this obviously doesn't know anything about Newfoundland and Labrador, and most certainly doesn't know anything about rural Newfoundland and Labrador. So it's disappointing.
The province's tourism minister, Steve Crocker, called for the ad to be removed, saying it's not an accurate representation of our province, our culture, or our people. Vrbo says the ad is a dig at its competitor, not the province, but that's not changing things for Saunders.
I've never used Vrbo before. I certainly will never.
Meanwhile, Vrbo confirmed to a Newfoundland and Labrador Senator, David Wells, that it is taking steps to remove the ad, but didn't say when. Heather Gillis, CBC News, St. John's.
And that is the latest national and international news from World Report. News anytime. CBCnews.ca. I'm Marcia Young.
Good morning, Manitoba, and hello, Winnipeg. I'm Marcy Marcusa. This is Information Radio. You're on CBC, 89.3 FM, 990 AM on the app or on YouTube. And it's Valentine's Day, so we're going to take a moment for that this morning. CBC's Jim Agapito headed out and about to talk to you about what today means to you. Is there anything you're doing for that special someone in your life this Valentine's Day? Or do you boycott the day? What's your love language is one of the questions Jim asked. So we'll get that fun on for you this half hour. Speaking of fun, a Winnipegger celebrates the return of the elusive McRib by eating it every day for many days. We'll find out more about that, and we'll also find out why he got so much attention on social media. He kept it going, and he wasn't seeking the attention. Stay tuned. It's a great interview. I spoke with him yesterday, so we're going to have that for you in a moment. Right now, let's go to Heather Wells, who's here with our news headlines. Good morning.
Good morning. Well, a survey commissioned by Legal Aid Manitoba wants to know your opinion of an alleged serial killer. Conducted by Main Street Research, this online poll examines public attitudes towards Jeremy Skibicki. He is charged in the deaths of 4 Indigenous women. The deaths of 5 family members in Carman are highlighting the need for more help for people who face domestic violence. Researchers and experts say Manitoba and all of Canada are in an epidemic of intimate partner violence. We'll hear from some experts coming up in our next local news at 8:30.
Thank you, Heather.
You're welcome.
Let's go to Abby Adeyemi and find out about the forecast.
Amountstad, it's currently -4 in the city. We may see some flurries later in Winnipeg. The airport already reporting some light snow, and the high for today is just going to stay at that -4. Throughout the day, expect flurries and then brisk wind from the west, and tonight we'll be dropping to a low of -15, but with the wind, it's going to be feeling like -22, so you might want to brace up if you're going to be doing anything special tonight. But right now, Winnipeg is at -4.
Thank you, Abby.
You're welcome.
Corey, I know you've been talking to a lot of people about what's going on out in Highway 1.
Yes, Highway 1 westbound, just at Deacon's Corner. There's a motor vehicle collision in that area that has it closed between Deacon's Corner and pretty much center of Canada Park. So Highway 206 and Highway 207 there. Been getting calls from folks. Thanks for everyone who's called with updates on how that's going. Very backed up right now, as you can imagine, westbound Highway 1. Some of those kind of service roads around there also getting very backed up as well. Folks are saying pretty much your best bet to get around it is either to take the 206 up north to Dugald and then take Highway 15 into the city, or take Highway 207 through Lorette to get around that. Those are your 2 best bets. If you try to take some of those like kind of back service roads, chances are you've had the same idea as a lot of other people, and some people are finding themselves stuck. So just be careful there. If you're heading westbound, Highway 1 right now, just around Deacon's Corner, there's a motor vehicle collision that's causing some big backups. Other than that, on McPhillips, in the city here, the one big issue that we've heard of this morning is from RuPaul. Eastbound William, just after you turn off from McPhillips, there is a lump of concrete that's just popped up and is waiting there to take a bite out of your tires. So just be careful there. Thanks, RuPaul, for that. She called it a lump. Someone called it a frost boil. I call it an inverse pothole. If you have another suggestion, give me a call on the CBC commuter line. Or if you see anything else going on out there, 204-788-3093.
Up next on the show, a lot of people have been noticing a Winnipegger who is doing something special, involving a famous sandwich that has come and gone from McDonald's menu for many years. I'm talking about the McRib. Ryan Zacharias is our next guest. He is a 30-year-old from Winnipeg, and he is with us now. Good morning.
Hello. Good morning.
So what have you been doing with the McRib?
Well, I've been enjoying the McRib. I got it the first day it came out, kind of jokingly just posted on Reddit, hey everyone, it's McRib's back. That was literally it. Didn't really think much of it. I don't use social media that often, so it was kind of a throwaway post. And then I kind of checked back before bed that day, and it had I think 200 or 300 responses to it. I think it had 400-ish likes. Definitely more than I've ever seen on anything that I've ever posted. But yeah, I kind of jokingly put myself to the task of having a McRib every day for 14 days in a row.
Take me back to day one when you make this first post. Were you a McRib fan back in the day as it's come and gone, as I mentioned, from the menu? Or why did you decide to have your first one and make a post out of it?
Part of it was nostalgia, and part of it was I did just genuinely like the sandwich. So the last time the McRib was here was around, give or take, 10 years ago. They do come back to America every now and again. The last time they were in the States was December of 2022, and I actually booked a flight to Arizona just to get a McRib.
Did you post about that?
No, I didn't, because I didn't think it was. I didn't think it would be a big deal. I think I took a selfie with me in front of the giant sign they had plastered on the window because they called it the McRib Farewell Tour, which I thought was hilarious.
So 14 days ago, you post this, you're going to have your first one. Now, did you plan on having a McRib every day for 14 days right from then? Or?
I certainly didn't expect to have McDonald's for 2 weeks in a row. Most of it was based on feedback on Reddit. Another weird thing that I didn't expect is a lot of people posting that aren't in Winnipeg. They're living in the Yukon. I've got a fellow in Regina. I'm just scrolling through it as I'm talking to you here. So people from various parts of Canada that are tuning in to watch me eat a McRib, which, again, I just can't wrap my head around.
So you're...
At that point, I knew I had to run with it. I had to commit to the bit fully. So I was basically just a picture of McRib with whatever I had on it. Usually it was some variation of pickle. And then I would gesture with my hand to show, day 1, day 2, day 3, day 7. So, so people know it's not just, I'm taking the same picture,
Proof of McRib.
Exactly, yeah. Well, it started proof of McRib, and then a lot of the comments towards day 11, day 12, day 13, they were actually jokingly calling it proof of life because no person, I think, should consume McRib 14 days in a row.
Now, I'll get to that in a second. So your last day was yesterday, the 14th day of this challenge you put on yourself. You put something special in your sandwich.
I did, yeah. So day 14, I kind of had to go out with a bang, and knowing that it wouldn't have been right for me to eat in my usual food court location. So for dinner, it was the McRib, and I went out and found some little sparklers.
Where were you normally, what was your normal food court haunt to get it, and where did you eat yesterday instead?
Yeah, so my go-to was City Place because I work downtown, and shockingly, the staff there started recognizing me by about day 8. I say shockingly because I always ordered through the app just so I wouldn't have to either wait in line or, in the brief 15-second interaction I have with the people there, they all started to recognize me. And one of the staff members, I believe they're making an arrangement for me to actually get one of those giant kind of billboard advertisements they have at the end of the promotion.
Ooh, so you're going to have a piece of McRib nostalgia to keep.
Oh, absolutely. That's 100% going to be sitting in my office on my wall. There's no way I can't rock that.
Any chance you'll keep it going? No, that's it, 14 days.
Well, I've had a couple people reach out, and they want me to do a surprise, day 15 or, no, I think I'm going to take a little break for now. I don't think I have it in me, right? I want to go back to having normal food at least for a bit. Maybe I'm going to look into how to do a juice cleanse because I think one of those is going to be needed.
You mentioned it started with the surprise that there were hundreds of people that were into it. By the end of it, then how many people were following and viewing your Reddit? The post I saw at least had over 1,000. So
my only metric is that I know I've been trending in the Winnipeg subreddit, which is that doesn't make sense to me. But and then even there was one day where I posted, 4 or 5 o'clock in the evening because I had something to do during the day. And I hopped onto Reddit. And before I was posting, I saw that the trending thread in Reddit was not one of my McRib posts or, an actual news article. It was a group of people, hundreds of people that were saying, hey, where's the McRib guy?
So I'm sure listeners have been waiting for me to ask this, but why? Why this sandwich, and not just this 14-day challenge, but the story about going to Arizona? What is it about the McRib?
I don't know. I probably jumped on the bandwagon at some point because I'm certainly not the first person to, chase down the sandwich everywhere it goes. There's websites dedicated to.
But when you're eating it, you must like it.
Oh yeah, no, it's a great sandwich. It's fine. I wouldn't say it's any better or any worse than really anything else on the McDonald's menu.
The other side of this is the people going, what? Pressed ribs, no bones? What? I don't get it.
Yeah, no, you have to know what you're getting yourself into as you're ordering it. Don't order it expecting this, the greatest thing you've ever had in your life.
So you already alluded to this a few times here, maybe not after 14 days. I think I'm ready for a juice cleanse next, you said. So how are you feeling physically?
Honestly, I've been fine, no change. I haven't really noticed any significant differences. I mean, I know obviously there's the documentaries about it, what eating, not even just McDonald's, but fast food in general for that amount of time can do to a person.
Like Super Size Me and such back in the day, those docs on McDonald's, yeah.
Exactly. And I mean, obviously, since those ones came out, I know they obviously made improvements to some of their menu items, like everything now has posted the calorie counter. So I know even just looking in the McDonald's app, I know a McRib meal with a large fry and a Diet Coke is only about 1,200 calories. I say only because it's not as bad as it used to be.
In the world of fast food, there's some context there. I think it's funny because you work in insurance, you shared. And I thought, would you insure yourself knowing you ate McRibs that often?
Yeah, it'd be that's well above my pay grade.
Fair enough. Well, McRib guy, congrats. We'll see if you go for more.
If nothing else, it's been nice to be able to provide something to a group of people or a community of people. It's kind of a break from, what is, especially recently, not been the greatest of news. Knowing you can hop onto Reddit, and a lot of times it's doom scrolling through. So knowing that I can, come in and post about a goofy sandwich from McDonald's, and that's what people are tuning in for. Like that's kind of a nice feeling, because, we've all been there where, it just feels like everything's, lousy.
Yep.
So being able to kind of provide an outlet for folks, even if it's for, a minute or two, that's kind of a good feeling to have.
That is Ryan Zacharias. I spoke with him yesterday. He has just finished eating a McRib every day for 14 days and become an unlikely influencer on social media. Never intended to do it. It's always that way, right? If you posted that, you meant to get followers, probably no one would care. But Ryan was just out enjoying the McRib.
There's one in Ontario named after a shoemaker. In Pennsylvania, you can visit a chocolate-sounding one. The English have one that's soapy. And in Japan, there's a whole big city named after a compact car. From Ottawa to Port Sunlight, company towns on Under the Influence with Terry O'Reilly. Thursday morning at 11:30, 3:30 p.m. in Newfoundland. And on the CBC Listen app.
It is 8:23 a.m. It's -4 in Winnipeg. We're going to be around that temperature for most of the day. Now, don't forget, at 8:37 this morning, The Current is all about Manitoba. They will have their show this morning. You can hear it. And it is a broadcast of last night's live show that was taped at the West End Cultural Centre. It was packed to the rafters. So you don't want to miss it, with live performances from William Prince as well in between the interviews. So that's coming up right after we're off the air. Right now, though, it is Valentine's Day, and we did want to know how you show love to your special someone or to anyone in your life. Is it an action, a gesture, or something as simple as, well, maybe washing the dishes? What's your love language to say it? I love you. We sent CBC's Jim Agapito out to talk to people.
My name is Bianca Lira.
And my name is Andres Zanola. You guys are a couple?
Yes, we are.
February 14th is coming up. Valentine's Day, that day of love. So I'm going to ask, what is your love language? Like, some people say it's doing the dishes, buying flowers. I'll ask you first.
My love language, I think, is like being present in smaller things, like coming with me to the market to do like groceries or things like that. I think this would be my love language.
We're pretty aligned on that because we spend a lot of time together and we're doing stuff together. So it's actually not about buying stuff or, gifting physical things, but to just, spend good time together.
My name is Artur Landell. It's a good time to spoil your partner.
Do you have a partner?
I do.
How are you going to spoil her?
I'll probably not go and eat out. I'll probably, take her home, cook something at home, and spend some quality time with her.
What's on the menu? What's your specialty?
Probably fettuccine Alfredo.
Like, people are very, coming together and sharing moments, but they're also very physical. So the way of sharing love is like, you're hugging your beloved one, you're staying a lot of time together.
I think even like talking to a stranger on the street, just asking about the day, even if you don't know the person, this is very common love language to show love to every single person.
Yeah, like you're walking around and you're holding hands, you're together all the time.
I think it's this. We actually have something that people say it's a completely love language. Is when a couple is walking on the street, the guy always keep the girl on the house side.
Yeah,
you protect her, and you can see always couples in Brazil. They are always doing this, and then you see it's a couple.
It's funny because you don't really think about it, but usually
unwritten rule.
Yeah, the guy walks on the car side of the sidewalk. Car passes, doesn't spill anything on her. I say Valentine's Day. You say
scam. Well, I think it's quite capitalized, and I work in restaurants, and it's a horrible day to take out your crush. We're overworked. Least liked day by all the staff. Wait times are long, service is bad for both the restaurant and the people.
People sometimes have names for each other, like my beloved, all sorts of things. I see you laughing.
It's complicated because it's in Portuguese, because we're Brazilians. When you say something is like just a little bit of something, you say like a teco of this. It's just a little bit. And I used to say this a lot for a lot of stuff. And then he started to say like, you say this a lot of times. And I started calling him like teco. And then we started calling each other teco and everything else teco sometimes.
Yeah, it's even a little bit hard to explain because it makes no real sense. But it just got to that, and we call each other's teco because it means like a small thing of something in Portuguese.
What is the most romantic thing that you did for your partner here?
I think the most romantic thing that he did to me was when I was coming to another country, moving from like another continent, and then he flew to the country with me just to show me around. This was like hours of flight just to show me around for 2 days and then go, just for me to not come there alone.
You did that?
Yeah, I actually did that, but yeah, it happened.
What country was it?
It was Denmark.
Wow, that is setting the bar pretty high, right? That is CBC's Jim Agapito out asking people how they show their significant others love on Valentine's Day. We've had a lot of talk about love this morning, whether it's with your partner, with your family, or your friends. And also, a lot of people hate Valentine's Day. I know that too, right? The commercialization, where it came from. The reality is, though, despite all that pushback over the years, February 14th, we still do it. Red, we eat chocolate, we head out and about for dinner. So let's keep talking about love languages. Corey Funk is in actually with a traffic update. But before we go there,
Yeah.
What do you have to share?
Yeah, well, so there's those 5 love languages, right? It's like words of affirmation, acts of service, receiving gifts, quality time, physical touch. And I would say I'm like very distinctly in the acts of service pretty much exclusively for my love language, I would say. Like, for example, gifts. Hate it. Like, I would rather spend 8 hours helping a friend or, build a deck to show my love for them than like spend like 20 minutes trying to find like a gift on Amazon for them.
It just drives you nuts, or the spending money on something that you're not
it's
sure.
Not that I'm cheap. I know they're probably like, "Oh, Corey, you're just cheap." But but it really is just the way I'd rather just spend that time with them and spend that time helping them out. I feel like it's just a more productive and more meaningful way than giving gifts. I know some people are very good gift givers. I am not. I've never been good at giving gifts. I'd rather just get together and do something together and then help out a friend.
It can be stressful, the gift thing. Now, what about how you receive love? Do you like gifts, or are you more also in the service aspect?
I'm so. It's very rare I get a gift where I'm like, oh my gosh, this is amazing. It's like, can we just hang out and like do something kind of meaningful together? That's my favorite kind of gift.
Well,
I don't know if that's like you, but
I know you got a traffic update, but let me just say, Jean-Paul, if changing out a light fixture in the house. Ooh, baby, that's my love language. Thank you.
Aw, that's so sweet.
All right, let's get to what's happening in traffic.
Yeah,
we have very little detail, actually, about what's been going on Highway number 1 at Deacon's Corner, but it is still affected, right?
Yeah, that's right. So all morning, Highway number 1 westbound at Deacon's Corner has been closed right up to between there and the Centre of Canada Park. So that's been closed because of a vehicle collision involving a few semis. There's been some tow trucks on scene, I've heard from folks. So the best way to get around that is either 207 through Lorette or heading up 206 up to Dugald and then taking Highway 15 into the city. Otherwise, a lot of the service roads and stuff are starting to get pretty backed up, I've heard from folks. Another heads up from people about the highways as well. Barrie just called Highway 75 very, very slippery, and actually just south of Glenlee in particular, lots of semis and other cars in the ditch. So be careful. Look out for that if you're hitting Highway 75. If you see anything else, give me a call on the CBC commuter line. Got one more hit, 204-788-3093.
Your news is next.
This is CBC News. Good morning. I'm Heather Wells in Winnipeg. At 8:30, it is mostly cloudy right now. That wind northwest gusting to 35. It is -4, and that is the high in Winnipeg for this Valentine's Day. A Legal Aid Manitoba Commission survey wants to know your opinion of an alleged serial killer. The survey is conducted by Main Street Research, and this online poll examines public attitudes towards Jeremy Skibicki. He is charged in the deaths of 4 Indigenous women. Anthony Robinson is a Vancouver-based criminal defense lawyer. He says Skibicki's defense may face hurdles if the intent behind the survey is to use the results to renew calls for a judge-alone trial.
Just because people have answered the survey one way doesn't necessarily mean that they wouldn't change their views once given instructions by a judge about how to apply the law to a particular set of facts.
Robinson says the survey may suggest the defense's path forward in Skibicki's trial. You can read more on this story at cbc.ca/Manitoba. The deaths of an entire family in Carman have renewed discussions around domestic violence. A 29-year-old man faces 5 murder charges in the deaths of his 30-year-old partner, their 3 young children, and a 17-year-old relative. RCMP would not label the homicides as domestic violence, and that does not sit well with some experts, including Tracy Afifi, a professor of community health sciences at the University of Manitoba.
If we don't frame it within the context of intimate partner violence, then I think we are doing a huge disservice. And what we know from homicides in Canada is that it's estimated that about 20% of all homicides in Canada are due to intimate partner violence.
And Statistics Canada says Manitoba has the second highest rate of intimate partner violence among the provinces. Afifi says more resources are desperately needed to protect and support women and families. The PC energy critic is disappointed the CEO of Manitoba Hydro has been fired. The ouster of Jay Graywall comes only 2 weeks after she said the Crown Corporation would have to look to private providers in order to meet the energy needs of the province. Grant Jackson is the PC MLA for Spruce Woods. He says the NDP is being ideologically rigid and doesn't have a plan to address the energy crisis.
How are they going to afford to build more generating capacity in this province without considering partnerships, which is what they've announced, and also calling on them to stop interfering at our largest Crown corporation and let the experts manage this utility back into sound fiscal health.
Jackson says the NDP could end up increasing costs for hydro by insisting all future power sources are publicly owned. Last summer's strike at Manitoba Liquor and Lotteries is estimated to have cost $10 million. The estimate is based on projected sales had the month-long labor dispute not closed some liquor marts and stopped production of distribution of products. Glenn Simard is the minister responsible for liquor and lotteries. He told a legislative committee hearing yesterday the cost to the corporation is more than financial.
When assessing the overall cost, I would be remiss if I didn't mention the cost in the workplace and the employees for Manitoba Liquor and Lotteries.
Liquor and Lotteries expects to make up for the lost revenue this fiscal year. CEO Jerry Sewell says Manitobans are buying more coolers, ciders, and other pre-mixed products than last year. The Trudeau government announced another $60 million in funding for the Ukrainian war effort. The money will go towards a training program for Ukrainian pilots. The pilots are learning to fly F-16 fighter jets provided by Norway, Denmark, and the Netherlands. Thousands of gig workers across Canada, the U.S., and around the world say they are on strike today. They will not turn on their apps to accept rides on Uber or Lyft or deliveries from companies like DoorDash and Skip the Dishes. The workers are looking for more money and better working conditions. Bryce Sofer is a gig worker who says over the span of a 2-hour shift last week, he made $6.
I live in Toronto, which we know is one of the most expensive cities in Canada, and those types of earnings do not meet the needs of people who live in this city.
Demonstrations are expected today in Winnipeg, Toronto, and Vancouver. And celebrating the Year of the Dragon. Some 600 people at a Lunar New Year banquet hosted by the Winnipeg Chinese Cultural and Community Centre. The festivities kicked off with a lion dance. Kenneth Tonthat was one of the young men beneath the lion's long, colorful costume.
Good opportunity for us to bond together and also really focus on our tradition and keep it alive. It brings luck and fortune to everybody, and we just want to scare away anything bad that may come in the new year.
The lion leapt and danced, making its way to every table in the banquet hall. People tapped the lion's forehead, put red envelopes of cash into its mouth to bring good luck for the new year. You can find more news at cbc.ca/Manitoba.
Thank you, Heather.
You're welcome.
Heather Wells, Megan Ketchison, as well as Chris Armstrong, I believe, out there today in our news department. Brad Lillies, Abby Adeyemi, and Corey Funk. Thank you, guys. Thanks to our hardworking teams of associate producers and the leaders in unit, Nellie Gonzalez and Leif Larson. So we're about to wrap. Corey, last look at traffic.
Yeah, Highway 1 westbound at Deacon's Corner closed right now. Closed all morning because of a motor vehicle collision. You want to take either 207 or 206 to get around that. Highway 75 also very, very slippery. Look out if you're heading south of Glenlee. Some semis in the ditch.
Abby?
-4 in Winnipeg, -12 in Brandon, Chile -21, Thompson -26, Churchill -4, Steinbach, and -8 Morris.
All right, Manitoba, stay tuned because The Current, live from Winnipeg, taped last night at the West End Cultural Centre, is up next right here on CBC. 89.3 FM, 990 AM on the app or on YouTube. Take care and be well. Emily Brass is filling in tomorrow, and the mayor is on the show as well, so it'll be interesting to hear what he has to say about the budget. Remember, they still have to vote on it in March. So hopefully you tune into Infrared tomorrow, and I'm back again on Friday. Take care. Thanks for listening.